Great, thank you. Okay, I call to order the regular board meeting of the Board of Education for Park Ridge-Niles School District 64 for Monday, April 20th, 2020. Carol, if you could take roll, please.
Sure. Dallas here. Sanchez. Riles.
Here.
Gaji.
Here?
Little.
Here.
Pearl.
Here.
Great, thank you. Okay, the administration has asked us to consider going into closed session tonight under 2C1 for collective bargaining and, I'm sorry, for employment related issues, and under 2C2 for collective bargaining. Do we have a motion to go into closed?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Denise, was that you on the second?
It was Denise.
Yeah, there was
Now
Denise in
she's
the second.
Okay, so I'm going to take the roll. Soto's not here. Little.
Yes.
Riles.
Yes.
Biagi.
Yes.
Sanchez not here. Pearl. Pearl's muted. Pearl. Denise.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Dallas. Yes. Okay. Motion
Great.
carries.
Okay, we're going to go into close now. So just for the public's understanding, we are shutting out of this Zoom meeting right now. We're going to be going into a separate Zoom meeting for closed, and then we'll be coming back at 7 p.m. To adjourn the regular board meeting at that point.
All right. Good evening. This is the start of our online regular meeting. Let me introduce the board president, Rick Biagi.
Thanks, MJ. So we are back in open session right now. The board adjourned to closed session at around 5:30 p.m. this evening under sections 2C1 and 2C2 of the Open Meetings Act to discuss collective bargaining issues and issues related to the employment compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees. The board adjourned around 6:35 and came back now into open session at 7 o'clock to start our meeting. So with that, can we take roll one more time, please, and then we'll go into the meeting.
Okay. Dallas here. Little.
Here.
Pearl.
Here.
Biagi.
Here?
Riles.
Here.
Sotos. Sanchez.
Here.
Before we get started, Eric, did a new link get sent out to Tom for the meeting? Okay.
It did, yeah.
Great. All right. Thank you. Okay. Larry, would you be so kind as to lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thanks, MJ, for finding the flag for us tonight. Okay, well, I really don't have any specific remarks other than to, again, thank everybody for the flexibility and MJ for putting this all together for us tonight to be able to hold this meeting with the public virtually. It looks like we've already got about 12 attendees on board, and hopefully more will come in here. But I was going to ask Eric to take a moment just to update us on the governor's most recent actions with regard to the school year and just what that looks like and some of the things that we've been briefed on over the last couple of days.
Sure. So on Friday, the governor announced that school will remain closed and we will not have in-school learning for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. We sent out a pretty large communication to our families and staff late this afternoon that contains a lot of key information that parents might want to see in regard to what this means. In terms of, all events and anything associated with the schools is canceled throughout the remainder of the year. The one exception being graduation, it's just been postponed, and we will look to schedule it again when we're allowed to do so, so that our kids can still have that ceremony. In terms of what will happen this summer and what will happen next school year, we don't know yet. We are, I only learned of the governor's announcement a little bit before it happened. So as each new piece of information comes in, we'll continue to share with our staff and parents as we learn more. We're continuing to talk about all of these different topics, including summer school, including events for the summer, and now looking to how those will be affected. So I just encourage parents to reach out to principals or reach out to administration, me, if there's any questions, and we're more than happy to help. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We're on to public comment on non-agenda items. Excuse me, just as a reminder to the public who's watching this remotely right now, we have the ability to accept questions remotely throughout this meeting this evening. The email address has been up on the board's website along with all of our agenda information for the past couple of days. We do in fact already have a public question for the non-agenda item section of this, but I encourage anyone from the public who's watching this at any point during the meeting tonight, if they do have a question related to any of the specific topics on our agenda, we will make sure to stop the meeting after the board's had its discussion and with each agenda item to determine whether or not any questions have come in at that time, and we'll address them on each of the agenda items. So again, I encourage anyone watching remotely to feel free to send an email into that email address. So Natasha, if you wouldn't mind reading the one question we did receive, and just for public record, the board received it, I believe, maybe 24 hours ago or so. So we've had this for a little bit, but it's part of the record for this evening.
That is correct. So I'll read it verbatim. Good evening. My name is Adriana Correa, and I own an emergency daycare in Park Ridge. My question is, what will the new procedure be for 2020-2021 school year to prevent the spread of the coronavirus on a daily basis at school? For example, DCFS has reduced capacity to 10 children per classroom. It is mandatory to take temperature to each child at arrival. Constant disinfecting with bleach/water on surfaces is required. Will e-learning be an option for parents? What testing for the virus will be implemented at school? Thanks.
Natasha, would you mind reading the person's name into the record as well, too?
Adriana Correa Cherry.
Great, thank you. Dr. Olson, you want to address that question?
Yes. So I'll address several of the questions, starting with what will the new procedure be for the next school year? To be honest, we don't have that information yet. It sounds like DCFS has already provided some of those pieces to this person, but the Illinois State Board of Education has not given us any guidelines in regard to the 2021 school year. So I can't speak on that. Obviously, also with so much unknown, it is too difficult. Obviously, we're talking through different scenarios. We just can't say for sure what those are going to be as of yet. In terms of what testing for the virus will be implemented at school, again, that would fall into that same category. If we are going to do something like that, that's information that we haven't received yet. And then the last question was, will e-learning be an option for parents? And what I just want to explain is, at least right now, how it's set up is that we either have to be doing remote learning or we're not doing remote learning. It isn't an option for certain parents to choose that path. But I don't know if the rules are going to be different as we go into next year, because obviously things are continuing to evolve. So we'll have to see what that entails and if that will be an option for parents, but it hasn't been up until this point. Thank you.
So I just have a quick question on her question. She referenced that there's a CDC or a Springfield requirement in place of limiting to 10 children in a room. Is that, what is she referencing there?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know. The only thing I could, is yes, the government has asked us to not gather in groups of 10, but that's the only reference I have.
Okay. And Tony, you're not aware of any guidance in
Oh,
place right now?
without looking into that further, what it sounds like she's talking about is that right now, as you know, for essential workers, they had to open up certain daycares so that the essential workers had somewhere for their kids to go. And what it sounds like she's referencing is the current guidelines that are in place about gatherings. And it sounds like they're implementing those, testing, temperature taking, when they are doing these essential daycare centers. But again, I don't have confirmation, but just hearing that, it sounds like a lot of the procedures that are in place now. And like what Eric said, it's really early to find out what it is that we'll be dealing with at the beginning of next school year, based on whatever orders will be out at that time or guidance from the CDC.
Great. It sounds like from at least the beginning of her email that she may be operating one of those emergency daycares right now. So that's probably what she's referencing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other comments from the board on that before we move on? Nope. Okay, and Natasha, anything else you've received in the interim before we move off?
Not as of right now.
Okay. Okay, we are going to move to the approval of the meeting agenda. At this time, is there anyone on the board who would like to add to, delete from, or amend otherwise the current agenda in front of us?
Rick, I was wondering if we could have a discussion of the capital projects we currently have, including the Washington construction and the progress on that, and whether or not we want to continue going forward with stuff like that.
Sure. Obviously, we can't take action on doing anything like that. We could certainly have a discussion. Is Tony, we have to vote on adding, right? It's got to be a voice vote up or down to add an agenda item. Okay. So I will take your question as a motion, Fred. Is there a second to Fred's motion to add an agenda item tonight, a discussion agenda item to discuss current capital projects that the district is doing?
A second.
Larry, was that you?
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of this motion, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Okay. Fred, I will, so we've moved it in, and why don't we put it in right after if everyone's okay with this, after we have the A2 and A3, the discussions of remote learning and expanding the continuum of services. As we start going into sort of money issues, then we'll put it at that point, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Everybody all right with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else? Any other additions, deletions, amendments to the agenda? Okay. All right, we are moving on to the next agenda item, which is an update on remote learning. MJ.
That would be Dr. Lopez.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Well, it's hard to believe, but this week is our 6th week that we are away from school, and we're actually starting our 5th week of learning from home. I'm really pleased to report that District 64 continues to have a very high percentage of students participating in remote learning. So daily we have an average of about 80% of students logging in. And we're contacting families who aren't logging in to see if they are experiencing tech issues or other challenges that possibly we could help with. Last week, as you know, we reviewed feedback from almost 1,000 families through a remote learning survey. And the numbers actually look really good. More than 70% of parents said they're satisfied with the time students are spending on the program, either because they feel it's just right for their student or because they've already reached out to their teacher to make some adjustments. And then we have about 12% of parents who are finding remote learning activities to be too little, and around 18% feel like it's too much. So we have teachers providing additional resources to parents who feel like they're looking for more in terms of remote learning. And our teachers have also personally reached out to parents this week who feel like remote learning is too much, to see how we can make adjustments to the schedule for those students. Other topics that were shared that we're addressing, we're brainstorming ways with the kindergarten, first grade, and second grade teams ways that we can design activities that help students work more independently. We're really working on reducing or even eliminating the need to print some activities at home. And we're working hard to streamline communication so that parents aren't receiving multiple emails from multiple teachers at the start of the day. Last week, actually, we hosted a number of workshops in collaboration with our ITC team and MJ for teachers on live conferencing, on video recording, and on several interactive apps. The professional development was very successful, and it enabled many teachers to launch on these platforms this week. You know, this whole process has really been a very collaborative effort, and I want to formally thank our teachers and our curriculum team and our tech teams for their efforts to stay connected to students. We have started to introduce new content, and I believe we're really maintaining the momentum of learning for students. And of course, at the heart of this are really our parents, many of whom are juggling their newfound roles as substitute teachers with their continued work life. I think the teachers and I have talked about how parents are really hitting this out of the park, and we're very grateful for their partnership. Of course, as remote learning continues, the program will continue to evolve in response to student needs. We have a commitment to looking at you know, how we're doing and what we can do better always. And so that's where we're at right now with the program. Are there any questions that I can answer for the board?
I have a question, and it's one that's I've had some trouble with and I've heard about from a lot of people, is the attendance check-in.
Mm-hmm.
That you have to do it every day, and you can only do one kid at a time. And I promise you, I probably entered my oldest 3 for one day, then forgot my other kid. And why do we have to do it? And is there a way that we can enter maybe the week and all the kids that we have?
So MJ and I are actually working on this. One of the reasons that we were doing it was to be able to track people who aren't participating in e-learning so that we could reach out to them to see, boy, is this a tech issue, or is there something around engagement that we could do for your child? But MJ and I have gotten this feedback from the parent survey and through conversations with parents. So we're trying to brainstorm a way that people can add multiple students for the week.
Is the participation pretty standard across the district, or are there higher percentages of non-participants in different schools?
I don't see differences in attendance by school, but I see it by age level. So it's a little bit higher at the elementary schools, closer to 85% at the elementary schools, and a little bit lower at the middle schools, closer to 78, 77% at the middle schools. So we're, you know, again, when people aren't participating, we're reaching out directly to families and students as well to see what we can do to encourage that participation. But it does look higher for the younger kids than it does for the older kids, although 75, 76%, I'm hearing from other districts, is pretty high for middle school kids.
So can you like briefly describe the process for when you say you're contacting students and you're reaching out? What do you usually do?
So our teachers, one of the reasons why we had the attendance set up that way is our teachers were reviewing the spreadsheets and looking to see maybe who wasn't signing in, but then also checking on student work to see who maybe wasn't submitting work or participating in classroom discussions. So after teachers note that somebody hasn't been there for a couple of days, they're reaching out to their school principals. Teachers are first contacting parents and saying, they're really trying to frame the message not as one of compliance, but as one of invitation. So saying to kids, hey, we miss you. We really miss you. We wish you'd join the activities. Is there something going on at home related to technology or to the schedule that we could assist you with so that you join us? And after the teachers have reached out twice, they're then referring that to the school principal, who's reaching out to families more directly to ask those same questions. Is there something that we can do to encourage you to participate in remote learning?
Is there a way that teachers could indicate whether or not a child was present based on the work that they're doing, and maybe have a parent just like they would on an ordinary school day, indicate that this child will not be participating in remote learning today? I mean, I think it would take some of the burden off parents.
That's actually one of the things that MJ and I had discussed too, if there's a way for teachers to track that through collecting student work, or just even in their interactions with students, either through the live platform or one of the other interactive apps. So that is a possibility, Fred. That's something that we're also looking at. Maybe we don't take attendance at all. We just have teachers submit the names of kids who aren't attending like they would on a regular school day.
Great, thank you.
So then after this gets to the principal, and the principal, so what does the principal do? Does the principal just call, email, and all of that sort of thing? And then if, let's say there's no contact, then do we have a special list for people who we haven't heard from?
Yeah, the principals are tracking that. They're trying to make it very personal. So instead of an email, they are starting with a phone call just to reach out to families. We know people are sort of lost in their email right now, right? Because so much communication is happening that way. So their first line is to really call and say, what can I do? How can I help you? If they're unable to contact families, they're tracking that. But they don't have a way to sort of encourage compliance like we do during the regular school year, right? Because it's not a truancy issue. It's just an issue where you know, we want these kids to join, but if families are making the choice not to participate and they're not in contact with us about how we can alleviate that for them, we don't have an alternative at this time.
So then let's say we just don't hear from them, then would the process be that they just get an incomplete at the end of the year?
The process would be that they would get an incomplete. And one of the things that we're brainstorming as a curriculum team, and I suspect we'll brainstorm with the social work and counseling team, is how do we help kids who have been disconnected from school for a certain amount of time really reconnect to school. So we might think of a transition program that looks a little bit different for those students. You know, how do we support them with being back in a relationship with their teachers and with their peers, because they will have been sort of gone for an extended period of time. Other thoughts or ideas?
I don't have a thought or idea, but I would like to, along with everybody else that you thanked, I'd like to specially thank the tech team and MJ and the work that they've done. It's unbelievable. I talked to my kids about it. You know, neither one of my kids have a problem with it. My wife has had no problems with logging onto it. These Zoom meetings and everything else that got thrown at them, within minutes, they had to put together all this electronic and digital life stuff. I really want to applaud. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Anything else from anyone on the board? Okay, and MJ, you didn't have anything else to add then, right? Or you did?
No, I didn't. Lori and I, we're like two peas in a pod about this whole thing. So we've definitely been in conversation about how do we make it better, responding to feedback, and we're constantly evolving this whole situation. So thanks for the support.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, thanks to both of you for the presentation and for all the work that you're doing. Okay, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is a rather large, and hopefully we'll have a robust discussion tonight on this, and that is the program proposal from our Director of Student Services for expanding the continuum of services for special education. So, Dr. Frost, take it away.
Thank you.
And Leanne, just before you get started, just for those that are tuning in tonight so that they understand what the plan is that Leanne's going to be giving this presentation tonight. The board's going to be discussing it, and we may hear public comment, but then the board is not going to be voting tonight. We have a special meeting set up for a week from tonight where we have a couple of agenda items, that one being a big one. So the board wanted to take some time to consider everything that they're hearing tonight, and consider any opinions that they're hearing and so forth before making a decision next week. So just wanted everybody to know the setup. All right, go ahead, Leanne.
Thank you.
So as Mr. Biaggi said, I'm going to present to the board a program proposal that will expand the district's continuum of services. And I'm going to begin our presentation by providing an overview, not the actual iMovie, that has been made available to the public and also to our staff. So if you will bear with me, I'm a little bit new at this technology, so I hope that it works the way that I want it to work. Okay, can you see it? Hello?
No.
Okay. This was my greatest fear, and I practiced. So, okay. Let me see if I can do this one more time. Okay. I am sorry, people.
You're okay.
Can you see it now?
No.
I'm not sure what's happening, why it won't do it.
Okay, so for our board members, it is in the agenda. So it is under A3, there's additional information. And do you want them to be on 2021 program proposal first?
Yes.
Okay.
So, okay. So we
And then-
began.
Sorry, Leanne, just holding on a second. And Natasha, my understanding correctly that this is live so that the public could also click on this if they wanted to?
No, they cannot. That's only
They
for the
cannot.
board,
We'll have
the
to post
report.
it tonight.
I'm going to try and see if I can pull it up on my screen while you're talking. Give me a moment.
Sure.
I can,
I
I can
was-
share it if you
I was-
want me to. Yeah,
I was about
either
to
way.
do that.
Yep.
Natasha, I'm just about to do that. I've got it up, guys. So.
All right, thank you.
You go ahead and you can start talking.
So we begin our presentation with a welcome and an introduction of all the special and also of all the special education coordinators who assisted and provided both voiceovers in the slide deck. Our original intention was to make this presentation at a community forum meeting on April 2nd, but we needed to alter our plans in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to gain feedback on this presentation, we created a Google form to gather the community's perspective. Additionally, respondents were encouraged to reach out to me. We wanted, the second slide was our mission statement, and what we wanted to do was remind our audience of the Student Services mission statement. And we use this mission statement as our guide in creating our path for decision-making and innovation. The mission statement aligns with the overall district mission. One of the questions we addressed in building a new program is the why, meaning what is the rationale for building a new program and what is the data to support it? MJ, can you go to the next slide? We provided background on this journey, starting with the findings in the audit. The audit was done in the spring of 2018 and indicated a need to explore the development of specialized programs to serve the unique needs of many of our students. Further, we as an educational community, parents, staff, and administrators couldn't agree more of the importance of providing exceptional programs to meet each student's needs to promote academic, functional, and emotional growth. Furthermore, the district continues to use the options of placing students in programs outside of district boundaries. When we engage in that practice, we actually promote a disconnect of families, both parents and students from the District 64 community, as many of the students in outplacements do not engage in activities, including school extracurricular activities, leagues, and park district activities, and partly because they just don't feel part of the community. Additionally, most students in outplacements are in facilities without general education peers. Hence, as students learn new or improved skills, they do not have a typical setting to practice or generalize these skills. Lastly, by expanding our continuum of services, we can further support the unique needs of our students. So this was our why. Next slide. Besides the why of creating a specialized program, we also reviewed our data. The data reviewed was taken from the 2019 Illinois report card. Overall, in District 64, 5.3% of students with IEPs are being outplaced, or as the student defines it, as separate facilities. This is above the state target of 3.9%. In reviewing the data, most students who are outplaced or in separate facilities have disability eligibilities of autism and emotional disabilities. Our district also has a fairly large population of students with a disability eligibility of developmental delay, though the data source does not indicate the percentage of students who are in outplacements. Hence, we have a fair amount of students who are being educated outside of District 64 boundaries. The program we have developed and are presenting can consider students within these disability categories for service within the district. This program can be considered for students currently in District 64 programs, as well as those being educated in outplacements. Next slide. In developing this proposed program, input was gathered from a myriad of sources. Our PT3, or Parents and Teachers Talking Together group, has been engaged in the discussions regularly about creating a new program since November. There have also been sporadic discussions with this group since the spring of 2018. Additionally, Dr. Olson formed the Special Education Advisory Committee. This group has focused on the need and classroom components of creating a new program. We have also reached out to area districts and special education cooperatives for input and guidance. And lastly, Dr. Olson and I were engaged in discussing the need for a specialized program for the 8 district schools before Act of God and remote learning began. Next slide. Our presentation continued with a listing of definitions that we were going to use throughout the presentation so that all would have a common understanding of the terms. Next slide. We also introduced and named the program, a proposed program, the Structured Learning Community Program, or SLC for short. Next slide. The next slide provides a visual of the classroom arrangement to support students within the Structured Learning Community classroom. There are clearly defined spaces, which allows for easy understanding and transitions and low distractibility. There are opportunities for whole, small group, and individual learning. The purpose is to teach skills in a structured setting to then be generalized into larger settings. Opportunities in all instructional settings are key to increase mastery and the goal of generalization. A classroom like this is conducive to learning as students may be overwhelmed by additional sensory input in less structured classrooms. They have visual perceptual difficulties or are sensitive to auditory input. This type of classroom allows for less auditory processing time with additional visual supports included and increased around the room. Some visuals will define an expectation without verbal prompting. This structure also guides students in recognizing boundaries and physical locations. Our next slide actually gave a virtual tour of what a sample setup would look like. Depending upon what our physical space would look like, it would vary a bit, but when we look at this type of classroom setup, we're looking at very similar types of structures that were also listed on the picture in the slide before. Next slide. This program is being proposed for incoming kindergarten students through 3rd grade who need specific systemized opportunities. This classroom will use a structured teaching approach. We'll have reduced sensory input for the students as well as sensory supports for student needs. There will be built-in communication systems that are individualized based on student need. The students will have direct instruction and repetitive practice with the use of emotional regulation tools. All social interactions will be taught and supported. Students will be taught functional skills and will utilize a specifically tailored curriculum. This classroom will support all transitions and teach prerequisite skills that will be necessary for students to be successful. Classroom routines and expectations are explicitly taught as well as rigidly followed. Students participate in behavior reduction and the teaching of appropriate replacement behaviors and skills. Next slide. This program will have 5 goals. The first one being increased opportunities for integrated activities with general education peers in the areas of academics and social skills. The second goal is to address the whole student's academic, social, communication, behavior, cognitive, and functional needs. The third goal is to maximize student independence and socially appropriate functioning in the school, their home, and their community. The fourth goal is to support students generalizing skills learned within structured environments to outside of their classroom and also into the home and community. And the fifth goal is to provide curriculum and instruction that is aligned to students' unique individual needs. The SLC program will allow parents an opportunity to network with other parents who have similar type students and allow students to create and sustain friendships with like students and general education peers. Next slide. We have proposed for this classroom to be located at Washington Elementary School. We are looking at placing this class in a quiet hallway located near student bathrooms and a student break room. We will also provide transportation to this program. Next slide. We established entrance guidance. Entrance guidance for the SLC program provides parameters that will help the IEP team make appropriate programming decisions for students. Students who are eligible for special education services and have significant academic, cognitive, social, emotional, adaptive functioning, or communication needs may be appropriate for this program. Next slide. The IEP team will determine opportunities for inclusion in the general education setting in the areas of PE, health, art, music, and academic classes. Next slide. Placement decisions will be made in the following manner. If a kindergarten through 3rd grade student has already established a home school, the parent can make the decision about whether or not to move the student to the SLC program. If a student is being considered for outplacement and the SLC program fits their needs, the SLC program will be explored first. Finally, if a student is currently outplaced and the IEP team determines the SLC programming meets the student's needs, the parents can determine whether or not to move the student. The ultimate goal is to provide the least restrictive environment for the student in which their needs can be met. Next slide. The next portion of our presentation explains the supports that would be available within the SLC program. Next slide. We anticipate the range of students participating in this classroom to have a wide range of abilities that require services from a variety of support staff. Those staff will work collaboratively to ensure student needs are met, as well as support the training of other staff within the building. Next slide. A variety of replacement curriculums are identified to address academic, language, motor, behavioral, and social development of our students. We use replacement curriculums when students' individual skills are significantly discrepant from their peers. These curriculums are discrete in teaching and multisensory in nature. Next slide. Additionally, teaching-specific teaching strategies and techniques will be used. These strategies and techniques are concrete and explicit in their teaching. Next slide. One of the techniques is visual schedules. Visual schedules are an important tool that will be used. They can be individualized or used with a whole class. They may be pictures or text or a combination of both. They may encompass a student's whole day or can be used for a span of time as short as perhaps 4 minutes. Next slide. Social stories is another technique that we use. Social stories are ways to introduce a new experience, reflect on an experience, or help explain a situation. Like visual schedules, they can be all pictures or a combination of text and pictures. The level of print is appropriate for the child's ability. Social stories can be used one-on-one with a child or with a whole class. They can also be created and shared with family and caregivers to be used outside of the school setting. Next slide. Assessments that will be used in the SLC are designed to show a student's progression of skills. They may be given multiple times a year and will help give information on students' skill levels and anticipate the next skill. Next slide. As we plan for the SLC, we want to make sure all needed staff are trained. Staff working within the SLC will receive training on curriculum, techniques, and best practices. Washington staff as a whole will receive training. This includes specials teachers, general education teachers, teaching assistants, lunchroom staff, and playground supervisors. Even custodians and bus drivers will be part of the training. Staff will be provided social stories, visual schedules, and other tools as needed and appropriate for their role. Next slide. The next section discusses how the district plans to move forward. Next slide. Our proposal is to begin with one class, grades kindergarten through 3rd. That being said, we anticipate the class will have no more than 8 students. We know that we will need a minimum of 1 teacher and 1 teacher assistant. We anticipate that there will be additional one-to-one teacher assistants for students. We project that we will need the related services of a speech and language pathologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, social worker, psychologist, a board-certified behavior analyst, and assistive technology specialist. Once we know the students who will be participating in the program, we can better determine the amount of time we need for each therapist. Next slide. As this is a new program, we want to ensure we are evaluating the potential benefits of this program. We will be monitoring students' growth and data associated with the Illinois report card to qualitatively determine if the benefits are being addressed and met. We will also conduct a parent survey of those who participate in this program to gain their perspectives. Next slide. This proposed plan describes a program to implement beginning the 2021 school year. We anticipate that as students move up in grade levels, an additional classroom will be added. Additionally, we will evaluate the need of developing such a program at the preschool level. Last slide, which concludes our presentation. So that's just a summary of the iMovie that we had prepared and had distributed to the public as well as to our staff. One of the components that we also put together was having a feedback survey afterwards. And if you would like, I could go into the feedback, or if you have questions in regards to the presentation.
Why don't we see if there's any questions first, and then maybe we can start going into the feedback. Any initial questions from anybody on the board?
I have a couple of questions, of course. Dr. Frost, have we identified children that are being outsourced this year that we can bring into the SLC classroom?
So we have not gone out and promoted with any family or with any parents regarding students participating in this program. I will tell you though that based upon this presentation, and I know that there were sharing of information when we presented this to PT3, at this point we have 4 families asking about the program and wanting to be a part of it.
The next question, I realize we're starting at Washington, but in the future, I assume we're going to do an SLC classroom maybe at Field because they feed into separate middle schools. I would hope we're looking at something like that in the future.
One of the things that we wanted to make sure that is that we didn't overplan or also underplan. So as we see students needing this type of program, we would need to expand. Right now, we're looking at it more so in a linear approach. So as students age up after 3rd grade, then we would start a 4th and 5th program over at Washington School. And then as students went into middle school, that program would fall into Lincoln School. If we find that we have enough students to open up a 2nd classroom, I think that that would be a discussion that we would need to have as far as the location of it.
This is more of a question, I guess, for Luann. Do we have money in the budget for this?
You're muted.
Hi, Larry. No, this would be in next year's budget. So, but I have not budgeted for it since I don't know what the personnel or other needs will be.
Okay. I certainly want to find the money for it. I think we're finally headed in the right direction here.
Well, if we can bring some children back in from being placed outside of the district, that certainly will help.
Yes.
With the funds that we would need.
I think the reverse is also true. If we could not place children who we currently have in district, outplacements as well.
What happens if you have more than 8 participants or people that want to participate?
Well, we're not anticipating that we're going to have more than 8. At this point, we've kind of identified what our pool would be, and based upon our pool, we don't anticipate that we would have more than 8.
Can I ask what happens to their siblings? Do the siblings have the option of going to Washington too, or no?
Yes. And so one of the things that we did, and this kind of leads into the survey that we did after this is, we got people's perspectives, and from that, there were additional questions. So what we've also done is we've developed an FAQ, and that is one of the questions that we put on our frequently asked questions as far as would siblings be able to attend over at Washington. And we would use the process for any other parent who would request for a transfer for a student from one elementary school to another school. But we are definitely very willing to work with parents who want their siblings to attend Washington School if they have one of their children going into this program.
And we made sure that Washington was able to handle it if assuming all children that were in the program had a sibling across the board, and we have room for that.
We're anticipating that, and until we can, I think that there are some little bit of unknown questions until we have approval to move forward on this program. We really can't define how many staff members that we would need, how this would impact Washington as far as would they need to open up another classroom for any siblings that would need to come over, or would we be able to handle those students within the classroom setting?
But yes, I feel confident that we could.
Yeah, I'm not anticipating there's going to be a problem.
Any other questions before we hear some of the survey results?
Well, I looked at the FAQs. I didn't see much about training. Have you started looking into what the plan would look like for training and whether staff at other schools would also receive similar training?
So one of the things is that some staff have already expressed interest in being a part of this program. And so they have already asked to attend some of the trainings already. So some staff have already attended trainings.
Just a quick thing. I attended the PT3 meeting when this was initially presented, and some of the staff and parent feedback, there were some logistical questions similar to your question that you just asked, Carol, about training or windows. But I just want to share too, I was impressed. I have my notes from that meeting, and one of the individuals said, this is such an opportunity to make change, not a negative, and we can see our children grow and retain in our community. So I just thought I'd pass that along.
Would you like me to share the responses that we received from the survey?
Yes, please.
Okay. So because the iMovie went out last week, we had really a limited time to gather input, and we kind of set Friday at noon as a time that we were going to take the input that we had and analyze it. So by noon on Friday, we had 174 respondents. We have had some other responses afterwards, and we can certainly go back and add that information into what I'm going to share with you today, so that when we come back next week, Monday, we have a full range of what those responses were. The survey responses are representative of all of our schools, and parents with students in outplacements were also part of the respondents. In preparing the survey responses, each comment was coded individually. So even though there are 174 respondents, if they gave more than one comment, we coded those individually. So there's a lot more comments than there are participants. And one of the things that we noted too, and do you guys want me to try to see if I can project the charts or not?
Yeah, either you or MJ.
I don't think MJ has them.
Well, they're on the agenda, so.
Oh, okay.
Or I can try to if you need.
I'll go try to find them.
Yep, I am not doing this well. I am sorry, people. I did practice this though.
It's okay.
We have them though, so you can, I mean, you can talk through them as we're getting them up. I think that'll work.
Sure. Okay, so when you look at the charts, one of the things that I do want to point out is that the values on the charts differ. So when you look at the values on the strengths chart, the values, the hashtags that are marked for the number of responses are much greater than what you see on the other two charts, one for the concerns and one for the additional feedback. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that those values differ. We tried to make the charts common, but it would not allow us to do that. In relationship with strengths of the program, there were 217 responses. The top 3 strengths were identified as follows. Over 75 comments noted a strength in that this program had specialized instruction, and basically specifically addressed the supporting of the needs of our students. The second strength was in regards to students that had the opportunity to remain in the district. And then the third strength was the inclusion of students, both general education and special education students, as well as students in the SLC program. And basically, the idea of providing the teaching of skills for students to practice those skills in a general environment. Like I had mentioned, in many of the outplacements, students don't have the opportunity to engage with general education peers. And so in this type of environment, they have a classroom where they can come learn the skills and then practice that within the general education environment. When we talk about concerns, there were 197 responses for concerns. The top 3 concerns were identified with staff allocation, specifically how many staff and when will staff know. This is something that we've also addressed on our FAQ. As I had stated previously, once we know the students who will be coming into the program, we do anticipate that we will have a better idea as far as how many staff that we will need. We do not anticipate that it's going to be a large number of staff. We know that some of these students may currently have one-to-one teacher assistants, so we may not need to add any more one-to-one teacher assistants. We do know that there is going to be a need for some additional therapy time, but we are not thinking that we need to have them as new full-time employees, but perhaps, you know, portions of a full-time equivalent. We talked about the next comments that were concerns were related to costs, loss of homeschool, and entrance guidance. So when it came to costs, some respondents were concerned as to the cost increase. Again, I do not think that it is going to be a significant amount of money for the district, but as soon as we know who the students are, we will be able to project that cost better. There are concerns as far as trying to start this program in light of COVID-19 and the cost that the community would assume with the issues around COVID-19 and perhaps some of the concern about property taxes. Property taxes was a continuous comment made on the survey. So there's our concern chart, thank you. There was concern about loss of homeschool, and while we understand that this may be a concern from some parents, we also know that keeping students within our district is important as well. And then the last high concern was in regards to entrance guidance and feeling that the entrance guidance was too strict. We provide entrance guidance to help show a distinction between this program and the instructional program. And we feel that entrance guidance is important as it assists in keeping what the focus of that program should be and why that program was developed. So obviously IEP teams will have discretion as far as looking at that entrance guidance and seeing if students would be appropriate for it. But we want to remain true to what the purpose of this program is. So that's why we created entrance guidance. The last chart we had is for additional feedback. And when we look at the top three comments, the first one was in regards to expression of appreciation of the communication and noting that how it benefits students. So we had over 35 comments that were related to that comment. The next one was in regards to staff training. And again, this was mostly positive. We had 10 comments saying how they appreciated that staff was going to have the training and that people within Washington School would have opportunities for this training as well. And then the last highest comment was in relationship to cost and inclusion. And there was a mixture of both positive and negative concerns in regards to this comment. And the question mainly was whether or not the cost was too high for the number of students that it's going to be beneficial for. And again, if we looked at the cost for students we outplace, we do believe that the cost will be less than what we place students in outplacements for. So those were our survey responses at this time, and we can provide additional information with the new comments that we have received and any additional comments that we receive from here until next week. Okay, any questions in regards to the comments that we were provided with? Okay. One of the things that we felt that we needed to do as we were receiving comments was develop a frequently asked questions sheet because as we were looking through the comments, we felt that some people were asking questions or maybe did not get the intent of what we were trying to express within the iMovie. So we created an FAQ and we can post that on the website tomorrow morning. I'll ask Peter to do that for us. One of the things that I want to highlight on that is the idea of whether or not we looked at other programs. What we did is we looked at really 4 different types of programs. We looked at what our current model was. We looked at what our current model would be if we tried to modify it. We looked at what a cluster program would be, and we also looked at what full inclusion would be. And what we decided at the end was it was kind of like a hybrid of a cluster program, but also with making sure that there were elements of that inclusion piece. So it wasn't true to any one of those 4 models. And that was based upon the feedback that we were receiving from PT3 and the Special Education Advisory Council. Now, one of our members of PT3 wanted us to look at some of the other programs that were within the area. Most notably, we're talking about Lake Forest. And Dr. Olson and I did have a conversation with Lake Forest. I also had a previous conversation with Lake Forest. Lake Forest is in a process of doing a full inclusion model. They're actually in year 6 of that and still progressing with that. One of the things that is notable with that program is the training and the time that they are taking moving forward on it, but it has been a 6-year process and they are not finished with that process at this time. I think another concern that we had with the Lake Forest program was the cost of it. They were able to provide us with the allocations that they utilize per building. We looked at what our allocations would be as well using that model, and our model would, we would have to ask for a significant cost increase for us to replicate that type of model. Any questions?
So you looked at all these models. I think a lot of parents have had this question based on the Herod audit, because she was very specific about the decline in the continuum of services over the past 2 years. And I don't think anyone has ever really heard what that was, or like just an articulation of what exactly, what are we missing that we had 2 years ago, because this SLC program is something completely different. So did you ever discuss that or figure out what Lisa Herod was talking about?
From my understanding, there's really a discrepancy as far as whether or not there was a decrease in the continuum of services. The services may have been configured differently. And one of the things when we looked at programming, we looked at our current programming and looked at the continuum of services that we have now. And it ranges significantly from general education with supports to a push-in model, to co-teaching, to a pull-out model, to an instructional model, and then looking at private placements and even residential placements and homebound. So we really do have a very large continuum of services at this point. I think one of the things that we're continuing to clarify is differences between like what a co-teaching model is and what a push-in model is. Sometimes those get blurred a little bit. We did some work with our principals this year in trying to more accurately define what those differences are. But when you look at Herod's report, she does talk about specialized services. And when we looked at what the needs of our students were, we really looked at the types of students that we were placing within outplacements and programs that we could provide starting this next school year in order to start trying to bring those students back or to prevent us from doing some outplacements. Now, one of the things that we became aware of as we were developing this program was the district actually kind of had this type of program approximately 9 years ago. We are not sure exactly why it got eliminated. We do have staff in district that had utilized or had been part of this model prior. But they said that they had returned to school one year and the program had been eliminated. It was at the time that the district was part of the special education cooperative that was eliminated. So not only did the district eliminate the use of the Strive program, we also did not have access to some of those programs that the co-op was providing as well.
Other questions from the board before I see if we've got questions from the public?
Leanne, can you just give me a ballpark? I should ask this ahead of time. How many students do we outplace from grades kindergarten to third grade?
I'd have to go back and look at that. We have 32 total.
32 in the district.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Natasha, any questions that have come in from the public?
There are no public comments or questions.
Okay.
So I just have a question about public comment for next week. Are we able to just post the link that we have as moderators? So if people want to comment, then they can just log into Zoom also.
MJ, you want to touch base a little bit on the, because you're asking about the technical piece of it, right, Carol?
Right. Is it just, you know, instead of reading email comments, could people just hop on and say their little comment on Zoom?
Yeah, I think what that would require, MJ, is that you give attendees the ability to either speak or type comments live in the meeting. And
or post the panelist link, and then MJ still has the ability to control them, you know, and mute them and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, we could move to working in something like that. We'll have to check out to see what the participant lists would be in that. And what meeting were you referring to for next week?
Next Monday.
Board meeting.
Oh, a special meeting.
Would it, you know, be possible just to even post the panel, or, you know, the panelist link that we have with the little, you know, meeting ID and the password, so that people can just, you know, jump on, and then maybe even if you think it's a distraction while they're not, you know, while we're not at the public comment portion, you know, maybe turn off their video or something and mute them, something like that.
Yes, we'll have to look at the controls, because there is a balance between allowing attendees to have full control over their mute or video, etc. And there's a difference between being a panelist and an attendee and how we set up the meeting. So we could look into that.
Yeah, I think obviously it meets Carol's interest, which I think is good, but also maybe it's a good meeting for us to experiment on anyway, since there's really only going to be 1 or 2 items on the agenda.
Is there a way for Zoom to separate it out? Because I like being able to view the panelists here on my screen. If we end up with 30 or 40 people logging in, how do we fit 50 people on a screen?
Attendees are not panelists, so they're 2 separate roles. Panelists are reserved for those that are running the meeting or that are presenting at the meeting, as opposed to being an audience member.
And I wonder if audience members, can they have the chat function? You know, is it turned on and turned off? So I think that's something maybe to explore.
Yeah. And like what Dr. Olson said, with a smaller meeting, it's probably a little bit easier to manage than with a larger meeting. And again, with it being a public meeting, you don't know who's going to come on the meeting. So there's no taking back in terms of things that, you know, that accidentally or inappropriate get shared or that get publicized.
So Carol, I mean, I think if where you're going with this a little bit is I've got some of the same concerns that, and obviously this is kind of the culmination of pretty much every day since I've been on the board till today with the issue with special ed. And you know, one of the first major steps we're taking, you know, I'm not trying to discount what you've done, Dr. Frost, over the last, in your tenure here, but one of the biggest steps we're taking to kind of turn the ship in a different direction. And I know I've preached from my post that I want this to be as open and transparent and as involved by the public as much as possible in this. So I share your concern that just getting emails in is going to be a little clunky, and maybe some people are not going to be that interested in sharing information or sharing thoughts by email for whatever reason, be more apt to actually comment live. And I mean, I'm certain there's probably a handful of folks who aren't going to participate at all because whether they're not comfortable with the technology or, you know, because of everything going on right now that they don't have the time to do it. And so I guess it's a bigger question for the board, which is, do we feel that we've had enough public participation, involvement up to this point for this decision that everyone on this board is comfortable making the decision? And I'm not opining one way or the other, and I'm curious what other folks think.
Do we have any data on how many people have watched the movie? I don't know if you've collected data on that. I'm just curious. I mean, we have the feedback data, but do we have data on how many people actually saw the presentation?
I don't know. I don't know if that is possible to see how many hits that movie had, MJ.
I'm taking a look.
Okay.
I do feel a little bit disconnected from the public right now as we're making or deciding to take a rather big step and turn this thing in a different direction. I do fear a little bit like you, Rick, that I feel a little disconnected from people, and I don't feel like we've had the level of involvement as we've had in the past. And maybe that's because this is happening virtually, but I do share that concern.
If I can interrupt, MJ, it's close to 1,200 views, 1,190.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I confirm that.
Is that unique views or just views, period?
Just views, period. However many people.
At this point right now, unless we dig down into the data in the back end, it really just shows 1190 views.
Okay. So Fred, I'll just play devil's advocate with you right now. You know, if you're concerned, what would make you feel better right now?
I don't know. I think kind of what Carl was getting at. I'd like to see some of the people that we've heard from in the past at some of these previous meetings voice their opinions, and I don't know. I just feel a little bit disconnected because I don't know if they're participating as they have in the past. I don't know. That's just one thing that would help me a little bit.
I feel torn between what you guys are talking about, feeling disconnected, and also just not wanting to keep spinning wheels after 2 years of trying to fix it.
Right.
Totally agree.
Yep.
And also, Dr. Frost, tell me if I'm off base here, but you know, part of the reason that we're even talking about it right now and doing a quick meeting next week is because if we don't make a decision in the, you know, now in this time frame, they're not going to be able to roll it out for August. I mean, it's just, you're not going to have enough time to get all the ducks in a row.
Well, and right now it's prime that we start having conversations with families if they're interested in accessing this program and planning for them, and then being able to determine the number of staff we need and then posting that. So we have IEP meetings that we need to be held, and then we have posting of positions that need to occur.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you a quick
answer is
question.
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Eric.
Oh, just saying that the short answer to your question is yes.
Okay.
How many people are on the meeting tonight? Viewing.
There's 14 attendees.
Okay. Has anyone commented? Has anyone sent in an email during this discussion or during the presentation?
No, no,
Questioning anything or of that nature? Okay.
nothing.
And then, so people knew that we were going to discuss this today. They had the information. There's no, I'm kind of talking to you a little bit, Fred and Rick. You know, don't feel so bad because people aren't, you know, even like commenting at this moment. Maybe we'll get them more next week because they'll know there's an actual vote. I personally would have liked to have heard from whoever is going to speak to us next week. I would have liked to have heard from them today so that I can contemplate it and think about it over the next week. But that's okay. I understand people are busy. But I want to also get out there. Leanne, this is not we vote on this and then you stop your job and you don't do any more work on special needs for the district. This is only addressing one element of what we need to address for the betterment of our program moving forward as an entire program. There's still other aspects, there's still other areas, other age groups that we're going to continue to address. So I don't want anyone who's watching this video to think that if we vote on this, that we wash our hands of everything else that's needed in the district. This is just one small element that's going to cost a lot of money, but still just one element to your grand master plan.
So it is one element. I disagree with you. I don't think it's going to cost a lot of money. But you know, there are other things that we need to look at. One of the other programs that we need to look at is whether or not we need to have a program for children with behavioral issues as well. That takes a lot more planning at this point. You know, that's why that's not the first one being rolled out. We also need to look at our internal programs that we currently have and trying to make sure that what we're doing is making sure that it's addressing needs of students. And so we have to have further discussions about the other programs that we currently have in place too.
I have a comment. I just believe, you know, we're kind of sort of acting like this thing was just developed in the last couple of weeks and people haven't had the opportunity to provide input. And this has been an ongoing process for some time, way prior to COVID-19, where I think the people who have normally voiced an opinion all have provided input to PT3, which has provided the input to Dr. Frost. And I'm perfectly satisfied with going ahead with this thing right now because I believe the input has been provided already. Just because we haven't heard it on the board, I believe that they've heard it in the district. And, you know, I like what I'm seeing. Having been involved with special education for a long, long time, I have been, had a daughter in sectioned off classroom like this where they've moved from one piece to the other. The design and the drawing and the staff I saw tonight, I saw 35 years ago in other places. And so I believe that I'm perfectly happy with it. And I think they've had the opportunity and I think they've already provided their input to the district.
I was going to say, I suspect you're right, Larry. And I guess my concern is, you know, it's kind of come to a head and folks are distracted, I think, right now with the pandemic and doing the remote learning. And I guess I'd feel better if we just, are we publicizing this next meeting on our website, on Facebook? I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that we're making a rather big decision. And I know there's a lot going on in everyone's life. And I just want to make sure that people tune in.
I mean, I think you're right, Fred, on both. So yes, we have publicized, but at the same time, I also agree there's a lot going on for people.
Thank you.
Yeah, just two comments from me. One is Larry. I'm far less concerned now with hearing from the usual suspects that we've heard from at, you know, our meetings for the last 2 years. And frankly, I just want to know that all of those parents with kids with special needs are aware that we're doing this right now. And I'm not saying I'm not convinced of that. I'd feel a lot better knowing that it was publicized to the hilt and they still chose not to, participate, because I have PTSD over that meeting we sat in October of whatever, 3 years ago, when the 7 of us were caught off guard and had no idea that this was going on, and it was such a big decision that was impacting, frankly, a handful of families directly, but it was catastrophic at the time. And I just want to make sure we're not there, but I'm with you that there's a lot more, the facts are way different this time around than they were 3 years ago.
And we can certainly publicize it more again this week.
So is everyone, I guess, again, I just want to make sure, is everyone comfortable with the game plan right now of, letting this percolate for the next week? We have time now to think about it a little bit more, and then we're going to have a well-advertised meeting for next week, same Zoom meeting, but a well-advertised meeting where we're going to invite public comment, and then we're going to vote at the next meeting. And we're all prepared to, unlike 3 years ago, the board is going to stand behind this decision, and we're going to actually sign our names to it. Everybody's good with that?
Yes.
And just to make sure too, we will post a FAQ as well.
Okay, thank you.
Are we going to post the results, the survey results? Those 3 slides?
We can, based upon that this was the results that we had as of noon on Friday. I think our anticipation is that as we get additional responses, we wanted to update that as well.
Sure.
And just to report to the board, we have 805 unique viewers, about 7.33 average viewing time.
Of the movie?
So not the full movie, because I think it was way longer than 7 minutes.
Yeah, it was about.
Yeah, it was about 28 minutes, 26, 28 minutes.
Yeah.
But it was a 7.33 average minute viewing, average.
Okay. So anything else tonight from any of the board members that we want to ask Dr. Frost, Dr. Olson?
Did someone just join our meeting?
Yeah, I was trying to inform you. You guys had asked that James Levy for our firm be present for the next agenda item. So I just texted him to join. So that's what it is.
Yep, James is on. So Natasha, I'll just ask one more time. Anything come in while we've been talking on this agenda item?
Nothing.
Okay, so everybody okay then with moving on? And, we'll go to the special meeting next week. I guess I would also say, if there's anything specific, any questions that after you've chewed on this a little bit more after tonight, if you've got specific questions, to send them off to Dr. Olson, Dr. Frost, and they can bring them to the meeting next week, have those questions answered and whatever else you want to discuss. And I would, to the public who is listening right now, I would certainly invite those comments as well too, whether you want to send them to me directly, or you want to send them to Dr. Olson or Dr. Frost, or even the info email address that we have on the website for the meeting, if you want to do that in advance. Any of those questions that anyone wants to send into the board and to administration, that we take those during the week, this coming week. Okay. Great. Well, if there's nothing else, then thank you, Dr. Frost, for the presentation tonight, and we'll see you in a week.
Thank you.
Okay. We are moving on to, well, actually, we're going to move on to what is, I'm dubbing like 4.1 or something, or 3.9 on our agenda right now, which would be what Fred has asked to discuss, and that is the Washington project specifically, and any pending capital projects, major capital projects that the board has right now. So Fred, since you asked for this agenda item, do you want to kind of tee up what your concerns are?
Absolutely, Rick, thank you. There's been a lot of conversation and chatter on Facebook and elsewhere in the community with respect to the city, park district, and the school board about capital improvement projects and whether or not these government entities should be continuing with them and pursuing them in light of the pandemic and some of the financial uncertainty that we may face. I know that we just recently poured the foundation at Washington, and I guess I'm just curious to hear from the board and from the administration. Are we at a point where it's possible to stop construction, given that we're at the foundation? Are we bound by contractually to continue on with the construction and spending the money that we've dedicated to this project?
Hi, Fred. Thank you. So James is here, so he can help me with this. So the current contracts we have are out and signed, so we are bound by them. And probably the money we would pay in fees and being sued by the contractors would far exceed any savings. I also did not see any negative comments about finishing Washington. I thought people thought we should finish it so we could have the classroom spaces. We don't have any other projects out, and we're not planning on taking any others out to bid. In light of the situation, we were kind of before that, we were putting a hold on it until we have the survey done. Going forward for our next 5 years.
We're relying on the Washington project being done in order to implement the SLC program we just discussed too. Is that correct?
Yeah, you would not be able to do it if we did not implement that, or if we did not finish the construction on that building. You could not have that new program there because, we're still at capacity in that building right now. The other thing I just wanted to kind of share with the board is, as far as District 207, what people need to understand is they issue bonds and they have to make bond payments, right? That's how they're paying for that construction. They can't decide to not pay the bonds or call the bonds in because the bondholders aren't going to allow it.
Well, it's actually worse than that, Luann, isn't it? Under state law, when it goes to referendum, they're legally obligated to spend that money and do the projects within a period of time. Now, I don't know if Tony or James, I don't know if there's some sort of force majeure in state law, when it comes to referendum questions like that and bonding, but I would presume they're somewhat bound, and they're already a good year into it now, aren't they? Into their
and they've all issued quite a bit of bonds already. So stopping the construction is not going to save any money because they still have to make their bond payments, and they're limited in the time frame. Are you there, James?
Well, that's what I want to do. I want to make sure. MJ, he said that I think he's having the same video issue that I did. I don't know if we need to accept him as a video. And then James, can you put yours on mute and so that we can test your voice? Because currently you're on mute.
There you go.
Hello?
James, I've unmuted you.
All right. So I'm not sure what's going on with his.
Do you want to text him again, Tony?
While you're figuring that out, Tony, I have actually a question for Dr. Frost that I meant to ask in the previous conversation, but it's related to this too. And that is, if we don't go back to classrooms in August, because of pandemic and we're going January 2021, obviously you don't implement what you've just proposed. Would you implement it in January if that's when we go back, or would you wait the entire school year to implement?
There is a benefit of doing it at the start of the year, like we would have if we—
Calendar year or school year, you mean?
The school year. So, we could certainly discuss it, but my preference would be to start it up at the end of August like we would any other program.
So you're saying if we're not going back into a classroom in August because of COVID, then your recommendation would be to push it till the next August?
No. This August.
No, so Leanne, I don't think you understood. So he's saying that what if we start next fall and we're not in-person teaching?
Only remote.
School, and then in-person teaching starts in like January. Would we start the program in January?
Okay, so my question would be, why wouldn't we utilize that program via remote learning starting in
Well,
August.
that was the question. So you're saying you'd still start it in August, even
Yes.
if you weren't in school?
That would be my preference, yes.
Okay.
Okay, but it's still, I mean, again, then to tie it into this, you obviously wouldn't need the classroom space in August because there is no classroom. You're doing something remote, just like you're doing right now. So you'd still implement, but you'd be implementing remotely.
Mhm.
Classroom space wouldn't be needed.
Yeah, and then when we would come back, we would, you know.
You'd move them into a classroom in January. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. It looks like we lost James now officially.
He was going to try to log out and log back in either on his iPhone or on his computer again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think the
there's
computer
see
works
his name.
better.
He's
Here
connected.
it comes. Woohoo.
No, he's got to mute. It's been so long though, so what's the question we've got teed up for him right now?
There we go. Are we
There
okay?
he is. I can
Hey, James.
remember.
Sorry
Oh,
about that. Getting my phone.
hi, James.
Hello.
We were just talking about, thoughts about stopping current construction projects, and I was explaining, to them that we have contracts out, and just a little about 207. I can't remember what our question was now.
Well, our specific question, James, was what if the board were to, and we can't do it tonight because it's not an official agenda item or an action item, but if we were to halt work on the Washington project, what contractual obligations would we have? Is there any sort of force majeure that we could that bring into play? What could be done, and what are we looking at penalty wise if we were to do something like that?
Okay. I'd have to check the contract, but generally, yes, there are force majeure clauses in play. Let me back up 1 second though. What's the reasoning, the thought behind pausing the construction?
The thought would be that we're not sure what our tax revenue is going to look like in another couple of months. If things get really, really bad economically, not that they already are really, really bad. If it gets worse, if the board just wanted to hedge its bets right now and kind of see how this plays out for a few months, whatever it is, and decided to halt as a result.
Okay. Generally, yes, there's a force majeure in the agreements that allow you to generally stay, if you will, the contracts for the duration of the force majeure. I need to look at them specifically to see exactly what those conditions are and how long, what the remedies are for both parties. Occasionally, there's provisions that allow both parties, the other side, if it stays for too long, to back out of a contract. So let's say at 30, 60, 90, whatever may be in there, they may be able to walk away. So we need to look at that. Ultimately, you generally do have also termination for convenience. That's going to put you in a position where you can end the contract if the force majeure or other provisions aren't there. You can pay up through where you're at, and you could walk away and then rebid, go back out when you think it was a better time to do that. But I'd need to double check the contracts, but that's ballpark kind of what you have is most likely termination for convenient provision. It'll get you out all the way. You pay up through wherever you're at in the sequence. Probably also any goods that they bought that they cannot return, you'd also probably be liable for as well. So for example, a roofing contract, if they're unable to return it, you might be stuck with shingles and have to wait until you use them next time.
Well, on the concrete walls, because we're using the precast concrete for the second story, are all completed and sitting in the manufacturer's yard waiting to be picked up.
Okay, so you could have an exposure generally, even on the best contracts, if they have items that are unique or things that can't be returned, you're liable for paying for them if they can't return them or stop the production.
Okay. So, I guess there's a couple ways to go with this. If we want to talk about this a little bit more, we can. If we want to add this as an official agenda item to next week's board meeting, and in the meantime, have James take a look at the contracts and see, learn a little bit more about what our exposure is right now, we could do that. Or we could say no, and we're just moving forward. I guess those are our three options.
James, they're standard AIA contracts.
Yeah, I just don't, it's funny that the provision that everybody's talking about today is one that I is probably never come into play, at least in my legal experience. So while we draft a very meaty force majeure, I can't tell you, I haven't looked at it for construction purposes in quite some time. So I need to refresh my recollection as to see what's in there and see what the options are.
I do know that there's quite a bit of material that's been pre-ordered, and as Luann said, all the precast concrete floors are all sitting waiting for delivery for the walls to be put up. They're starting masonry. The masonry walls are scheduled to start on Monday. They're pouring the concrete slab tomorrow, starting tomorrow. The underground is all completed. The underground, and as much as electric and plumbing is all completed and all backfilled, and like I say, they're going to pour the slab tomorrow. The slab needs to cure for about 5 days before they start the masonry walls, which is scheduled to start on Monday. And in approximately a week and a half to 2 weeks, they've scheduled the precast concrete floors to be delivered for the second floor so they can continue up with the walls. So I'm not sure. I know it's too late to stop the precast, and probably too late to stop any of the masonry and brick and mortar deliveries.
Mechanicals too, Ron.
Yeah, all the mechanicals have been pre-ordered. So I'm not sure how
Doors.
we'd be looking at just in pre-order items, not even looking at legal fees and subcontractors and all of those things.
It may be the case that we're too far along and it's going to cause more harm and cost to stop. But I just thought it was worth exploring.
An open job site.
Yeah.
That you're going to be paying to secure, depending on how long we would be sitting that way, we would probably want to put a permanent fence up instead of a construction fence, to keep the kids out and things and keep vandalism down. So, I personally, I think we're past the point of saying, let's hold off for the good of the community. I think would be doing the community a disservice if we held off now at this point. It'd be kind of like, look at all the money the district wasted instead of look at the money that the district's saving us.
Have they moved inside the building yet? Have they started any work in the auditorium? Now that the schools are closed?
They've started looking around in the ceilings, running some conduit and things like that, but we've held off any real demo just yet because staff still need to get in there to prepare. When they left, they didn't pack up their rooms for the summer. So we met, Eric and Luann and I met today a little bit and discussed, what our approach is going to be in getting those rooms ready so we can get contractors in there as soon as we can. And, if we can get started early, we might even be able to get a little credit back from the contractor by cutting down overtime on the tail end.
Exactly.
So, there's
we're
a lot still
looking into that
to be played out to see how we can make this all work. Because what I don't want to do is start dropping ceilings and tearing walls down with the rooms not packed up and take a chance of ruining people's personal things and making an unsafe condition for them to come back into to pack up the classrooms.
So any other thoughts from the board on, again, my three options there, whether we continue this discussion right now, we push it to next week and have James look at the contracts, or we don't entertain the discussion, I guess, anymore, and we press forward.
To me, Rick, it seems like we press.
I was going to say the same because I feel like it won't save us enough money. It will unsolve two problems we're trying to solve and possibly create more.
Right.
We still have to figure out how we're logistically going to get parents or students back in to get their personal stuff. So creating an unsafe environment inside the schools right now, I don't think we're ready for. So I think we just kind of push along.
Tom, we're actually talking about that Wednesday at our admin team about how students are going to get their stuff and everything.
And Fred, I appreciate you bringing it up. And I think we look at this for our future, what are our projects coming up? What are our expenditures? I think it's a great point, but just not for this project.
Okay. All right.
Mark, you moved.
What's that?
You moved to the other side.
I did. Oh, I did.
Your child did.
I'm sitting right where I was, Luann. Come on, I haven't moved.
You moved.
All right. I think we're going to move then on to, if everyone's all right with that, we'll move on to the amendments to the Transportation Services Agreement, which is A4 on our agenda.
So would you like to do the amendments to extend it for next year first, Rick?
Yeah. So I was just going to kind of tee up for the public from where we were last meeting and what we did and didn't do, and so why we have all of these amendments on there tonight. So everyone recalls at our last meeting, we had a fairly robust conversation about the Transportation Services Agreement. We had several open questions about what our legal obligations were under the current agreement, and we were going to have James go back and review that for us and deliver some thoughts on that from where we were. And at the time, we were considering a couple of things. One was a pure renewal, a one-year renewal of the contract. And then the other was what sounded like was going to be coming our way. And of course, it has come our way, which is a request from the transportation company to amend the contract to have us paying their employees, their bus drivers during the downtime right now. So that's what's on the table for tonight. Luann, did I miss anything specifically? Nope. No.
So do you want to start by having James kind of explain the letter that he sent to the board?
Yeah, that'd be great. And I kind of have an initial overarching question that is whether these amendments, or whether they're all listed as amendments, whether one is contingent upon the other. So if we agree to one but not the other, does that mean all of them are off the table, or can we, sign which ones we want and not others?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that question first, Rick. Unless there's some arrangement from the transportation company, for example, that they won't, they really have no leverage. You can approve the special ed or the regular ed independently. They're not tied together. They're separate contracts, so they're separate amendments. And then obviously for food services, the same thing as well, if you didn't want to approve that one. Going back to the contracts, looked at all of three of the contracts, and they're all pay for services agreements. So you pay for what they provide. So you don't have any obligation to continue to pay them since they've ceased providing work for you. If they've provided some work for you, then you need to pay them, but otherwise, no. There's also no imposement by ISB or the governor to obligate you to enter into these amendments. There's been discussion from ISB and from others that they encourage you to do this, to have the folks reimbursed and paid for multiple purposes. The most significant is to help keep them afloat, so when school does reopen, that you have transportation services available to you. Same idea for your food services as well. For transportation, as you know, or you may have heard, the payments for services under these agreements will be reimbursable at your normal rate of reimbursement. And Luann can talk a little bit more about that, even though they're not providing services. So in other words, before they would be getting reimbursement, you would be getting reimbursement for your expenditures for actually getting the transportation services. ISB has made it clear, and last Thursday amended their rules to specifically add that payments made under an amendment to an existing contract for services that actually have not been provided due to the COVID-19 pandemic will be reimbursable at your reimbursable rate. So that's where you're at. This is completely discretionary. You do not have an obligation to do this. It is completely and totally up to each individual Board of Education, whether or not they want to amend contracts. Food services and transportation are the two that I'm seeing the most have come through. Transportation is clearly leading the pack, followed by food services. And after that, it drops off significantly. We see custodians, security guards, OT, PT type of arrangements that come in. But again, transportation is probably the biggest one that we're seeing come through right now.
So James, I just want to underscore and reiterate something you said, which is, despite what it says in our memos for both this contract and the food service contract, there has been no request, demand, or otherwise from ISB or the governor that school boards take on this obligation.
ISB has encouraged you to do it. The CARES Act has also encouraged you to do it, but there is no obligation or mandatory direction for you to do it. So this is within your decision-making authority. There are boards that have decided not to do it. There are boards, the majority have been doing it, but again, that doesn't, each board is independent. So again, this is something that you have the authority to do or not to do.
Okay, so back to my original question about the independent nature of each of these contracts. So just so we're clear, I understand what you said a moment ago about the special ed and general ed contracts are independent of one another. I presume then also that the renewal has nothing to do with the amendment to pay these to pay the employees, that we could approve the renewal and there's no contingency upon us also approving the amendment.
Correct. The only thing that would be impacted is the number of the amendment. That's it.
Correct. Okay. All right. So, so we've got 4 issues we need to vote on tonight. There are 2 renewals and 2 amendments with respect to the employees. So I suspect we can probably knock 2 off fairly easily, and the other 2 maybe not so much, or at least may take longer to discuss. So at least if I'm recalling correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but at our last meeting, it didn't sound like there was any hesitation by anyone on the board to renew the contract with Lakeview at the 3.75 increase that had been proposed. Is that correct? Is there anybody who is, and again, this is not an official vote, I'm just making sure that we don't need to discuss that issue again. Is there anyone on the board that's had an issue with the renewal itself? Okay, I'm seeing shaking heads. So so it sounds like that's a non-issue. So we will take that vote shortly. But I think rather than taking that vote first and then going on to the other, we might as well at least get this out on the table, and then we can call an up or down vote on it. So I'm curious to hear where the rest of the board is. You've read the amendments and the wording in there with respect to their reps and warrants, that they would not take PPP money or other types of relief, and that they would not furlough or otherwise let go these employees that we're talking about. So there are reps and warrants in there, and presumably remedies for a violation of that if we were to pay it, but they are asking for 50% coverage for these folks. So I'm curious to hear where the board is on that.
I'll start. I can't in good conscience at this point vote to pay for bus drivers who aren't going to be driving. I just I can't do it. I would vote no on that. Of course, I would vote yes to renew the contract for a year, but I cannot vote to pay these bus drivers and they're not driving. I'm sorry, I just can't do it.
Rick, can I ask you a question? Is the bus company going to be paying their drivers 100% of their salaries?
Yeah, so the plan was they would pay the salaries and benefits for their employees. We had actually started at like 85%, because a lot of the districts are getting, I don't know, James, anywhere from 80 to 100% of their payment. And so when I talked with them, I said, there's no way our board, when I was looking at those numbers, I was like, there's no way we're going to approve it, nor would I want them to. So then we came back down to a 50% payment to them.
Question: if they're collecting 80 or 85% from every other district that they work with, and they're going to potentially collect 50% from us, they're going to use that money to pay their employees. However, they're not going to have gas costs on their books. They're not going to have maintenance and upkeep for the period of time that the vehicles are parked. Are they going to have a windfall? Are they going to?
No, I meant in general, Tom, not Lakeview. I'm talking about for students and them.
So, but let's talk Lakeview. Have we had a discussion?
Sure.
They're not going to end up with a windfall of extra money by collecting 50 or 80 or 75% from every district that they work with.
I would say that the other large employer for Lakeview, or district, I should say, is Oak Park River Forest Elementary. And so they're waiting to see what we do first.
Yeah, I'd like to, I mean, I know it's probably late now to ask this question, but assuming there is no windfall and assuming this 50% payment by us and every other company or every other district that they work with barely just covers their drivers and their employees' costs. Is it enough to cover 100% of the, or are they going to be paying out of pocket some of the expenses to their?
Oh, this is a small company. It's two individuals that own it, so they already are paying out of their pockets for items. And I just want to make sure you guys understand, I'm not fighting for this. I'm just presenting the information to you to make a decision on it. So, you know, it's really up to the board. My concern is that with it being a small company, is if we don't pay and Oak Park doesn't pay, I don't know if I mean, I don't know, but there might not be a bus company. So, I mean, and we shouldn't, I don't want you to feel like, oh, well, you're being threatening, but I'm just being realistic.
No. I listen, just to be clear, this bus company has been a good quality company for our district for the period of time that we've had them, and they've been a good partner. And if, you know, we can afford to help them stay afloat so that we can secure our partner moving forward, I would definitely probably lean that way, because I know how difficult it is to get a good bus partner for a district. I've been around here long enough to know, you know, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. I just want to make sure that if we're going to be paying our share and other districts are going to be paying theirs, if every district that they service decides to go ahead and agree to pay, that they don't end up with a windfall.
Right.
So I would have just liked to seen some language in this agreement that said that, you know, we would be credited depending on how many, because there is the chance that, let's say they have 10, let's say they have 10 districts and only 5 agree to pay and we keep them alive. We basically paid for the other 5 that didn't agree to pay for them to secure a bus service, which I get happens in some places. But if all 10 agree to pay, I just want to make sure there's no gain on their part where they're actually profiting off of this process. And if their books ended up showing that all districts paid and they ended up with a windfall, that each district that did participate would get credited a pro rata share based on their usage in their contracts. And if I saw something like that in this contract, I would be inclined to say yes.
So Tommy, just so you know, what's in here now is, you know, there's a limitation that they have to use your money to pay for our salaries and benefits only. And they're supposed to be giving you that certified payroll with the invoice showing that they're paying them. And if your payments exceed what they're paying to the employees, then you're supposed to get a refund. But I think what you're saying is a little bit different in that if the aggregate of everybody is paying them, then at that juncture, because if they pay with your money first, and then perhaps the high school or whatnot, then there could be some money left over on that end.
Right.
And so I'd like to challenge though, Luann, what you said a moment ago. If our money is solely to be used to pay salaries, which these folks could otherwise go and get unemployment for and get covered. How does us paying just their salaries keep Little Lakeview Bus in business if none of the money goes to the company to keep them afloat? If it's solely going to the employees, it's not helping the owners of the bus company pay the, you know, whatever, the finance charges they've got on all their buses or pay the mortgage on their bus barn or whatever it is. It's not going to that. It's not going to help because they're not legally obligated either right now to pay their employees for not working. Their employees could go on unemployment, which is precisely what unemployment is for. So what am I missing?
Unemployment's not going to cover their benefits also. I think that's only salary. Is that correct?
What you're paying for salary and benefits under the amendment.
Right.
What Rick is saying is that the salaries can get compensated or can get paid to the employees via unemployment. So maybe the 50% number that we're paying, you know, might be too, in connection with what I was saying, there might be a windfall here for them. Maybe we structure our payment to them the way a PPE is structured, a PPP is structured to everybody else. Use it for salaries. If you don't, it turns into a loan and you got to pay it back in 18 months. amortized over 18. I don't know.
I mean, would you like to see stricter requirements in the amendment, or, I mean, I don't know, maybe Rick, do you want to hear from the other board members too?
Yeah, I would like to hear from the other board members. Let's see, we've heard from Fred and me and Larry. So anybody else who wants to go?
Just to address the unemployment issue, there is always a cost to the employer when the employees are receiving unemployment. So it's not a net zero. It's not, you know, simply they can just go receive unemployment. It still could cause Lakeview to become insolvent.
Yeah, I think, do we pay 50% of an unemployment claim, I think, is borne by the employer. Is that correct? Carol?
I mean, there are various costs. So.
In a typical situation, there is, but there's a very good chance that the the employees that go out to unemployment on COVID, it will not be charged against the employer. We don't know yet. Maybe not. But also, we don't know how much credit the bus company has built up. You know, they've got multiple employees and they pay into it on a monthly basis or weekly basis. And if they haven't had many employees go out on unemployment, they might have a considerable amount of unemployment benefits built up where it wouldn't hit them financially, even if all of their employees went out for a month.
Oh, Tom, I don't know how that works because, like, we just got our first one the other day because I'm going in and opening the mail and stuff, and we pay 50%. So it's not, and we hardly have anyone ever on unemployment. So I'm not sure how that works because we're still paying 50% of that person's benefits or salary.
James,
so we
is
pay
that different for a public entity versus private?
We still pay in that unemployment insurance. And then anytime, and Joel can vouch for that, anytime we have someone on unemployment, we're paying like half of the cost out of our accounts payable.
Is the district's portion paid into unemployment potentially less than what would be in the world of private business? Are we, you know, being a school district, do we pay our share? Do we pay in less? Which would, if the answer is yes to that, that would justify why we would be picking up such a large cost and still doing so with so many employees paying into unemployment for all this time and not having many to go out on unemployment. It sounds odd to me, unless it's a school district thing that I'm just not aware of.
Yeah, any district I've been in, it's been this way. We have to pay it on it with our payroll taxes. And whenever someone's out on it, that's why we fight it. We end up paying 50% where we have to write a check for it. So I've never quite been able to figure out, like, why are we having to pay this when we're paying for insurance too?
My, oh, go ahead.
Something to look into in the future.
Rebecca, go ahead.
So my concern is that we finally have this good bus company, and especially these special ed drivers. I think we're in a good place where we're pleased with the service. We don't pay this. They go under, they don't exist. There's fewer bus companies in, the fall or next fall, and it actually costs us more money in the long run because there were fewer companies who couldn't charge us whatever they want. And maybe get worse service. So that's my worry, is that we have a good service that we're happy with. And I don't know how to balance that with, I'm worried that it'll cause us more problems in the long run, basically.
Rebecca's right, and I agree with you on the whole issue of this being a good bus service. I would just like to see all the agreements they have with all the districts and let us all sign them at the same time, so we know that there's no windfall. That's all. And I think we just owe that to our taxpayers.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I think in the long run, we want to keep our solid bus company. And it seems like even though the two contracts, we can improve the long term for next year, if we're going to pay the bus drivers in the interim, I just think somehow it'll affect our service going long term.
So
James, could we look at reducing the 375 down, 3.75?
What's the 3.75?
The increase.
The annual increase.
Oh, in the the rate increase?
Yeah.
If the other side's amenable to that.
You're saying to offset the cost of what they're asking for, Luann?
Yeah, so I just did a back of the envelope, like on a $1.3 million bill, okay, or contract. It'd be about 49,000 is for the 3.75 for next year. So
the wild card to me here is that, again, well, I think everybody knows where I stand in this, but the wild card too is it's just for, we're just talking now because we know now, but what happens if August rolls around and we're still not in classrooms in August? Now we're paying through January for this, and everybody's ready to sign up for that tonight. I mean, I also have to say, I hesitated to say this, but I'm going to say it on camera right now. The administration decided last week not to pay our substitute teachers, despite what 207 did in paying its substitute teachers. And now we're going to sit here and say we're happy to pay some third-party companies' employees when we're not even paying our own employees who are not working right now. I don't know how you win that public relations battle with all of our substitute teachers in the district.
we are paying our lunchroom supervisors, so.
But we're not paying our substitute teachers.
The substitutes are kind of hard, and I may get lost when I start in. Some of the people only worked maybe one day in the last 3 months. It's just a lot more difficult to kind of figure that one out with the subs.
I'm not saying it was a wrong decision, Luann. I'm just saying you've made the decision. Now we're going to sit here and say, but we're going to pay some bus drivers who aren't W-2 employees of our own district. And I think that's a pretty hard pill to swallow for those people, and a slap in their face.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I said what I said. In good conscience, I can't pay bus drivers that are not driving. I just, because of what's happened already, I just can't go out and do that.
Hey, Rick and Larry, I appreciate, and especially Rick, I appreciate the comment about our substitute teachers, and they definitely have a large value to our district and to our students. And I don't want to discount their value to us at all. However, it's very difficult to quantify how to pay them moving forward. What do? You take their last year's attendance? Do you take their last month's attendance? It's very difficult to
That's what 207 did. I mean, I'm not saying it's right, but that's
No,
precisely what 207 did.
I understand. But I don't think 207 has a bus contract they have to worry about.
No.
But
they have a food service one. Same one we do.
I'm taking these, just so you know, I'm taking these independently because my comments are going to be completely left to right field, depending on which contract we're talking about. So I really want everyone to consider the importance of this bus contract and the importance of it moving our children back and forth to and from schools, and the fact that we have a good relationship with a bus company. And if there's something we can do to secure that relationship and help them at the same time, as long as, again, like I said, we're only paying our share, not our share plus another district's share that decided they didn't want to do this. So if they can quantify to me that, you have this many drivers, and when they do work for you, these are the only drivers, and for these hours that we're going to pay, and we agree to pay 50% of that, then it seems to me to be a good relationship move. But I get what you're saying, Rick. This is a very difficult decision, and I'm hoping that the community understands how difficult all these decisions are for all of us to make, and some decisions will have to be made differently than others.
Aren't we showing by renewing their contract for a year that we're showing some good faith that we want them to come back, that we like them, but we're also showing that we can't pay them for not driving?
I think that's right, Larry, and I share your view in Rick's. I mean, I have a real hard time paying bus drivers that aren't working, and I have neighbors on the block that aren't working, and I have a very difficult time spending taxpayer dollars to do that.
I also want to challenge the notion that, in 6 months, 9 months ago, Lakeview had a difficult time getting quality bus drivers. Well, that was when we had historic low unemployment in this country, and we had the strongest economy in the globe. And now we don't anymore. Now we have 23 million people out of work, and higher unemployment than we've ever seen in our lifetime. And I suspect there's going to be a lot of people out there who'd be thrilled to take a $15 or $20 an hour job driving a bus in lieu of sitting at home not collecting anything. I don't.
Have you ever been on one of those buses?
You know what, Luann? I might be in that spot. I mean, God willing, I'm not, but I might be. And I don't know. I wouldn't make light of the fact that we've got 23 million people in this country out of work right now. It's pretty dire. So I don't know. Again, you guys know my opinion. I think we have a system in this country set up both at the federal and state level for exactly the situation, to cover unemployment when people are being furloughed because of something like this. And as Tom pointed out, I suspect that either the feds or the state or a combo of both are going to be coming in and crediting the businesses for that portion that they are, in fact, normally covering under unemployment insurance. They seem to be doing it in a lot of other areas, including with PPP. I'm not exactly sure why Lakeview didn't.
Why Lakeview didn't apply for a PPP?
They did.
Prepared to vote. I'm not words in your mouth, but it sounds like you would like more information before voting. And again, I haven't heard from anyone else to say they do or don't necessarily want that information.
Actually, Rick, I'd be okay voting with the caveat that and we can leave it up to our attorneys to put a paragraph in here that I'm sure the bus company will agree to, that we are only paying 50% of the salaries of the employees that worked for our district for a period of time that they worked for our district. And then I would limit it to the end of this school year, and we have to redo this thing again if we're out of school in August. They have to come back to us again and ask for this again so that we can reassess our situation at that time. This is just, my agreement is just to help them get through this first phase if there isn't going to be a second. If there's a second phase, no one knows. I mean, we don't know if there's going to be any money anywhere. So I don't want to lock myself into a second phase of COVID.
Just so you know, the agreement runs through the earlier of the termination of the stay-at-home, or the cancellation of school, I should say, by the governor, which since he extended that, that won't happen. The end of school, the 1920 school year, or your termination. So it will end at the end of the 1920 school year.
So they'd have to ask for another, let's say hypothetically, Governor kills school in August, or in person, I should say, school in August. They'd have to ask for another amendment at that point, James, to do this again.
Correct, for the 2021 school year.
So this is through June, effectively.
Yeah, it's through the end of your regularly scheduled school year for 1920.
But just so we're clear, it's also retro to when the schools were shut down.
Yeah.
Retro to May 16th, if I remember correctly. Yes.
March 16th.
March. I'm sorry, March. Yes, March 16th.
Have any of
I
their?
wish it was May.
And just to add to that, I mean, I'm looking at it. It's whether the stay-at-home order is lifted and kids go back to school. We know that's not going to happen this year. The end of the school year, or like James said, termination. The termination clause is at your convenience. It's basically with prior written notice to the contractor.
Of the amendment.
The amendment. You can terminate the amendment.
Right.
So, have any of their employees filed for unemployment? Do we know? Are there any of the employees on unemployment right now?
I don't know. I can ask Tom.
And they've already filed for a PPP. And I'm assuming they didn't get denied, but they just didn't get funded.
That's correct.
But they might get funded the second round if there is going to be a second round.
And we have that in the amendment, right, James?
No, but if they do get funded though, the amendment says they're going to deny it. At that point,
no. The amendment says they have to apply for it, and if they get it, then to the extent that they're able to utilize those funds to offset the expenses that you guys have paid, you're entitled to either a full refund if the funds were sufficient enough, or on a pro rata basis if they're insufficient. So that way, if they get, if they were somehow able to get 100% funding for their employees to cover their employees' benefits and wages for the time period that you've been paying for it, they end up getting a loan, a forgivable loan, for example, and that money comes in, then they have to refund the money back to you. You have the right also, I mean, they have an affirmative obligation to tell you they got the money and then refund it. On top of that, you do have the right to audit them. And if you audit them and it turns out that they didn't refund you the money, you're entitled to recover both the cost of the audit, interest on the money, and plus you have penalties.
I think we've done a very good job. When I say we, I mean these lawyers down here. I think they did a really good job, protecting our taxpayers' money. Now we as a board just have to decide whether it's a good use of our taxpayers' money to protect this contract, or want to roll the dice and go out to bid for another contract if they're no longer available to service us.
James, just so I'm clear, this was what was proposed to us. We have not countered with anything at this point, right? You guys didn't write this, they wrote it.
No, we wrote it.
For the transportation, we wrote it. For food services, they proposed it, and I modified it.
Okay, I was confused on that. All right. Okay.
I'd be on board with Luann's suggestion about countering that 3.75 increase, see if they can decrease that.
You could also just, I don't want to interrupt too, another thing just to think about is, you can always reduce that, is to try and get credit back over the year next year for what you've paid. So to the extent that you pay out X dollars, that if for next year they start giving you credit for what you paid them and spread out over that year, so that you can get it back, but it's not a one-time payment, so it hurts them. It's just something else to think about as opposed to reducing the rate. But
because options though, right?
yeah, I'm just trying to
like a flip deferment, basically. We pay it now, you pay us back over a year's period.
Correct.
So we're not really coming out of taxpayer pocket money. We're just advancing taxpayer pocket money and hoping they stay in business long enough to pay us back.
Correct. That'd be another option. Yes.
I'd be in favor of that if we got the money back.
Do you want us, I can go back and talk with them, or James and I can talk with them at the same time about that, you know, reducing costs of, well, it has to affect the district, right, our costs. So reducing the cost of anything the district's paying for interscholastic trips, you know, anything like that, and the regular, you know, busing.
Well, I guess we need to hear from the rest of the board where everybody is on this. So Carol, I was having a little bit of hard time hearing you, but it sounded like you had suggested maybe to go and try and negotiate the 3.75 down. Is that
right? That plus the credit option, maybe give them both. And then since this is a small company with 2 owners, I don't know how close Luann is to them, but maybe just try at some point during this meeting to, you know, contact them and see if they can get back to you tonight, if possible. I don't think it would hurt to try. Otherwise, we could, you know, discuss this next week, since conveniently we do have that, you know, meeting next week. But Luann, would you feel comfortable calling them at this hour at 9:13, or do you think they'd be annoyed?
Let me text Mike right now.
Okay. I mean, the good news is, Carol, we've got a meeting a week away. Like you said, it's not like it's a month away at this point. So it's not the end of the world if we had to wait a week on it. And I'm assuming there's not really a rush right now. We don't even know if we're going back to school in August, let alone, you know, the rest of this school year. So.
Well, I haven't changed my mind, and I'm not in the business of loaning out the taxpayers' money. So I'm standing where I'm at.
That is, you know, James, that is an interesting point Larry brings up. Is there a legal issue with that? If we were to do something like that, where because it effectively is a loan.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, right now, you're essentially, what we'd have to double check on is how that would affect, if they're going to credit you back toward the future, is see what ISB were to say on the reimbursement percentage. But I don't have a problem with them paying you back. My bigger concern would be see if that affects your reimbursement rate.
Okay. So what does everybody else think? I mean, it sounds like there may be a couple people who are okay with taking the amendment as is. It sounds like there may be a couple people that are no. And it sounds like there may be a couple people saying, we'd like to pursue, you know, a couple questions right now with the other side.
Right. In addition to that, I mean, I think as school board members, we always have that fiduciary duty issue. And I think that's kind of what Larry was getting at. But I do see both sides. So I think, you know, I'll just wait to see what happens with, you know, the other 2 negotiating points.
Okay. So, I mean, I'll go back, I guess, Denise and Rebecca, you were both, again, if I'm mischaracterizing, tell me here, but it sounds like you were both generally okay as is. What do you think about the new concept of 1, trying to negotiate down the 375, and 2, talking to them about treating this as, you know, sort of deferred payment back, so that effectively, as Larry put it, we're giving them a loan for this payroll for the short term, and then it's going to be issued as credits to us on the back end over the next school year.
Yeah, that's even better. I'm on board with that.
Denise?
I like the idea of renegotiating the contract for next year, and we're then saving, you know, the money there, which, you know, it works out in the long run. So it's a good idea, Luann.
So I'm not hearing from Mike right now, Rick. I mean, you can continue on. But if you guys want to think about, maybe it's better to put it on the other agenda.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't think you're going to be able to get anything negotiated while we're on a call tonight anyway. So I wouldn't want to take you away from the rest of the meeting to do that. So what?
Oh, I wouldn't want to either.
So if everybody's all right with that, why don't we table this until, we don't have any motions on the table right now. This was all discussion. So why don't we table this until the next meeting? Eric will put this on the agenda exactly as it is right now, and we'll get some questions answered and some negotiations done over those next few days.
Sounds good.
Okay. I'm not sure, Tom. Well, James, maybe the question's better for you at this point. I'm not sure. Let's say, just hypothetically, they're not willing to negotiate the 375 down. They're not willing to entertain this, whatever we want to call it, deferral of payments and credits. I'm not sure how to best address Tom's concern with them, but I'm guessing you probably have an idea as to how we might put something into the contract that gets Tom's concern addressed with respect to the windfall.
Yeah. Yes, I think I can come up with something. The only issue is going to be, it's kind of like the audit thing. I think we're going to be relying on them to essentially confirm with us that they've made some type of profit and get back to us. Otherwise, we'll have the audit. But I think we can come up with something with the aggregate of all the other funds that they get. And instead of being targeted, we'll to make it more of an aggregate application of all the money they get for not providing, and make sure there's not a profit in there.
Okay. Okay. So I'll leave that then to you. I mean, to me, as I'm hearing this, it sounds like that's sort of our backstop. That if the other two things don't work, then because Tom, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the windfall issue is not as much of an issue if this turns into basically a loan.
Correct.
Okay. So James, I guess that's it. If they don't go for that concept, then we're back to the windfall issue.
Okay. Is there a number that Luann can have that brings the 3.17, I can't remember the number, down, which would satisfy everyone? So if that was just 3%, say, does that alleviate it too, or is it?
Well, I think, again, if I heard Luann correctly, didn't you say, Luann, your back of the envelope on 375 was like 50 grand?
Yeah, I just used 1.3 million. I don't have like their total cost here. I mean, I just like said 1.3 million. So
yeah,
that would be if we took.
Yes, so 50 grand. I mean, what you've projected for this payment of the employees is 150 grand, right?
Yeah, that's the first payment.
Right, that's right. And so 50 grand's a drop in the bucket. And if we go from 375, down to 3, that's like 10 grand. I mean, we might as well not even do it for that. To me, it's zero that at a minimum. I don't know how, because 50 grand's not moving the needle at all.
Yeah, I think that's where we would start.
If not going the other direction, take more off of it.
Negative.
I mean, seriously, 50 grand. I mean, 10 grand's not even worth you having the conversation.
No, not based on how big this is.
No, and not with what they're asking.
I was just looking to see if I can pull my file up quick.
Okay, so it sounds like if it's not zero sum, then we want to have, I'll call it Tom's language, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay, everybody good with that before we move on? I'm seeing head shaking. Okay. All right, let's move on then to Quest, which is very similar conversation, with the exception that at the last meeting, we did in fact approve that contract, the renewal of that contract. So we've done that. What we haven't done is the amendment. So the amendment is the issue. And we were very particular about approving that, agreement at the last meeting because they didn't seem to be tied. And we felt that from a leverage standpoint, if they were offering it to us on that meeting, then we take it while we can before they were to use it against us. If we decided not to pay the employees during this time. So, did I get that right, Luann? The history on that? Okay.
Rick, everything I said about the bus company, the exact opposite.
Okay. All right. Julie,
So,
and Larry,
Rick,
I can try. Larry, I trust you're not changing on this one?
Do I?
I said you're the same vote as last time on the Quest contract? No different?
No different.
Okay.
Nothing's changing. I'm not paying people that don't work.
Got it.
So, Rick, just to let you guys know, just looking quickly at costs from a few years ago, if they took no increase, it'd be like $113,000 savings.
So
and our costs are higher now.
Okay, so that is significant if we go to zero.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there you go, James. I think that's a reasonable number. That offsets a big chunk of, or a larger chunk of what they're asking us to pay.
Okay.
And in that way, we don't have to worry. We don't have to worry about it being a repayment.
I can.
Yeah, sorry, we're.
All right, is that better? We're back on the bus, right?
I just wanted to let you guys know.
if that's the case, then that pretty much offsets the total amount that we would be giving them, right? Or close to for this year?
Well, for the first payment, yeah.
How many payments do we have this year? 2?
There would be one more, because this goes through the end of April.
So we would be paying them. So if they did us this, if we did them the solid by paying them, and then they did us the solid by not giving us an increase for a year, we would only be out of pocket our taxpayers' money 25% of the salary, not 50. Half, about.
A little less than half.
Okay.
Rick, you're on mute.
Sorry. Luann, I'm going to put the numbers up on the screen here. Give me 1 second. Does everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this 153,656 number is the actual cost to the district on the proposal from Lakeview. So you're saying that's payment 1, and then there's another payment after that?
Yeah, because this just goes through April 30th.
So you're saying it's a whole other, could be another 150 grand through the end of the year?
About, yeah.
Okay,
it's about the same number of days.
So we're really talking $300,000 here that they're asking us to pay. And at best, if we get the contract down to 0, that's 110 grand. So you're still at $190,000 delta on that.
Right. I just want to make sure you guys understand that
It's not that close. And 10 grand is even more insignificant as a result.
Right.
Yeah. Tom, does that change your thought at all? You're on mute.
No, I mean, I'm okay with the plan we had moving forward 2 minutes ago before we reopen this.
Okay.
Go back, try to figure out if we can make it a loan or recoup that money from them. I mean, and our attorneys can use their negotiating skills. It could be a combo of a 3.75 no increase for next year, and then the repayment of the rest, so that they're not repaying the whole amount and we don't have to try to recoup the whole amount. As long as the end game is it doesn't cost us anything, that would be a win-win. And then Rick, we're only really advancing like half of it instead of advancing the whole amount.
Right.
Well, maybe we could get them to do, we can't do a contract for 2 years. We can only do 1, but that they would take no increase that second year. I mean, if we come back and renew again.
Unenforceable, because you wouldn't be able to, they don't even have to deal with you at that point. They just be like, we're out.
Right.
All right, well, let's move back to Quest.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, so Luann, I had an initial question from your memo. I was unclear on, your memo says that they did avail themselves of PPP and they got money on it. So I'm unclear what they're asking from us vis-a-vis what they've already gotten from PPP.
Sure. Oops, let me just cancel this. I need to save that. So what they were looking for was they had, let me go back up to them. I'm still on transportation. So what they were looking for was, I gotta find it. I'm sorry. I'm used to having a hardcover, but that didn't happen this time. So what they were asking is help with paying the salaries from what can I find it in here?
You're looking for the dates for the 16th
Yes.
to April 10th.
Yeah, so March 16th to April 10th, because they can pay the salaries for the remainder of the school year from their grant that they're receiving.
So Luann, they are entitled for that period of time that you just mentioned that they're not going to be using PPP money for. They are entitled to offset the cost of those employees if they kept them on their payroll via
the I believe it's either the federal or the federal employer portion of the tax. So they'll be able to, depending on how long the government allows them to spread that out for, they're going to be able to recoup, if not 100% of that, back via a credit on their payroll tax moving forward through the end of 2020. So if their payroll for that period of time was 100,000, and the payroll tax portion, the employer payroll tax portion of it was 20,000, they would not pay that 20,000 monthly until for however many months it took to cover the 100,000. So they're going to get that money back one way or the other. There is you have your PPP, you have your EIDL, you have the EIDL. We don't even know if it's still in existence. It's kind of disappeared. But you also have the credit, the IRS credit that employers can get in their employer portion. So there seems to be a potential for them to quadruply double dip. Now, if they do get the money from us, they're not supposed to take that credit. But does the one side of the federal government know what the other side of the federal government's doing? And this one's a lot riskier for me to agree to, because they have the ability to recoup almost 100% of their losses. They've got the PPP money for the time moving forward, and they have their employer tax credit for the period of time from 16 of March till present, till the day they got their PPP and started paying it out. So it looks to me as if we don't really need to help them. I think they're going to be able to be self-helped.
And Luann, I just want to make sure that I understand this. The people that are employed currently distributing the meals, this is totally separate from that money.
I'm sorry about that. My AirPods died. As Rebecca had asked earlier today, the staff that's working, helping supply, lunches and that right now, that's totally separate from this.
I agree with what Tom said. I do think this is different. They are getting some funding. They are a much bigger corporation. So I think differently on this contract,
okay,
or approving this funding.
Me too.
Carol, Brad, either of you?
Same.
Same.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion.
Do you need a motion still?
Don't we have to have a motion to vote it down, right?
Okay.
I mean, if that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I'm not playing Karnak here, but I think that's what's going to happen.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the Second Amendment to the Quest Food Management Service Contract in the amount of $20,124.66 to cover salary and benefits to Quest staff for the period March 13th, 2020 to April 10th, 2020.
If there's a second, that's great. If there's not, this dies for lack of second. So I'll just throw that out there. Going once. Going twice. Sounds like there's no second. Motion dies for lack of second. Okay.
Thank you for considering.
Yep. All right, we are moving on to natural lawn care. And again, Ron, I know this one's yours. I'll just tee it up just as for the public. Oh, sorry, James.
I just wondered, do you need me anymore, or I'm happy to stay if you need me? Otherwise, I'll check out.
Think so. Tony, I don't think so, right? Nothing else on the agenda, James?
Nope, nothing. Nope.
James, are you at the office?
I am not at the office. I'm in my
your home office.
I'm in my home office.
I'm at the office.
Yeah, you look at the office.
Careful on the commute back home.
Yeah, don't fall out of your chair, James.
I know. It's my son. I don't even get started. All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Take care. Be well.
All right, you too.
I'll talk to you, James.
Yes.
Okay, so just to tee this back up, I don't even remember when this was. It was in the fall sometime that we brought this to the board. If everyone recalls, and for the public who's on listening, there's now 10 attendees. They're dropping like flies. We brought this up because the park district was looking at it themselves. It was sort of coming up as a result of the fall soccer and football season on the fields. The park board had initially put a hold on things while they were considering it. They had a public hearing at which they brought in some, quote, experts, and the board voted, and the board, if I recall the vote correctly, can't remember if all 7 of them were there, but it was definitely a split vote, but it did pass that they were going to continue to use biosolids. It was not a majority of the board. I mean, it was not a unanimous board that did that. So, but however, at the same time, back in the fall, we voted unanimously to stop using biosolids. So we currently have a moratorium on the use of biosolids on our fields. And Ron is coming back to us tonight to ask us to reconsider that. And in light of, some information that he's going to present to the board tonight.
Well, more along the lines, I'm looking to see what direction the board would like us to go. We have pretty much in the past followed the park district's lead, since they're our so-called local expert on turf care that we've always leaned on, and they maintain a good portion of our property. So, we've tried to stay consistent so that all of our playgrounds and fields are maintained the same instead of having 2 complete different programs. So since the moratorium on using biosolids, I've talked with Terry Wolf at the Park District, and I know that they've come up with this, well, he called it a new program, but it's basically going back to using biosolids with a few changes on policy of how they're doing it and when they're doing it, and to make sure they notify. In the past, the Park District never notified. They weren't required. I'm not sure if the law has changed for them. We've always been required to notify prior to any treatment on any of our turf. So for us, that part wouldn't change. Whatever we do, whatever we apply, we would still notify everybody in the school district of what we're doing and putting down, and we've always notified the park district so they can notify their programs. So
Ron, can I ask you real quickly just how that would play out practically? Because I know at the time in the fall when this came up, one of the concerns that was voiced by parents, this was really related to the football and soccer programs at the time in the fall. And those kids were, at Emerson and at some of the other big fields where this stuff had been laid down. And it was laid down very closely, allegedly at least, to some of the practices or games that were had, within a couple of hours. And, the difference with the soccer and football programs is they're not on those fields every single day. But, in theory, with us, we've got kids on the grass every single day, if it's, for recess or just kids walking to and from school. So we've got a little bit of a different situation, and that if there is truly supposed to be a period of time, whatever it is, to not be on the grass, how can we enforce that, which is kind of a different issue than what the park district's got?
Well, I'm not sure how it was done before I started with the district. Since I've been with the district, I hold off any applications unless it's an emergency application for bees or something like that. If there's a hornet's nest in the field or something. But for maintenance applications, I've always had it done spring break and over the summer. I know it's not always ideal for the turf growing season, depending on rain and temperatures and things like that. But I've always put the welfare of the kids first, that, we can try to recover some bad spots of the field, over the summer, or wait for a long weekend and do an application on a Saturday morning, knowing that we're not going to be back in school until Tuesday or something. But for the most part, we've done all of our applications since I've been with the district, spring break and summer. And then our fall application, when we were using True Green, we would do that either on a Friday after school was out, knowing that there was no programs over the weekend using those fields, or we would wait up through Thanksgiving, depending on weather. So we typically would not be doing any application knowing that kids will be on the field that day or the next day.
And just to clarify, we don't maintain any field, just thinking it through, where the park district would be operating one of their affiliate programs, baseball, football, soccer, right?
We maintain a few of the baseball fields.
Okay, we do. All right.
That they use, like over at Lincoln and a couple of those.
Okay, so those are us. Those aren't the park district.
Right. Yeah. So we maintain some of those, and some of those the park district does maintain. But
okay, so given that, I always thought they did all of them. But okay, so given that, if we were to go back to this, would we coordinate? So I hear you that, for instance, you're going to wait till spring break or the summer or whatever, but obviously those ball fields at Lincoln are being used around the clock during the summer for baseball, for the house league program and travel program. So yeah. Would we coordinate with the park district to make sure that we're doing it at a time that would be appropriate for their affiliates?
Well, that would be my goal. If that, if the board were to decide, yes, let's go ahead with the use of biosolids, or forget biosolids, with whatever program the park district is doing. If the board says let's take that direction to coordinate with the park district, then I would sit down with Terry Wolf and say, well, we need to coordinate the use of when you're spreading and what applications you're putting down when, so that it doesn't conflict with our recess and gym periods, and so it's not being put down the day of, the day before, that they would need to do our grounds the same way as I'm doing them.
So Rick, I haven't read anything in the proposal or heard anything tonight that changes why I chose not to use biosolids until this is being brought back up to us. Do we have any information that it's safe? Do we have any information that it's safer than what we were using, or not as safe as what we were using? How long do you have to be off of it when it is applied? Is it something that is going to disintegrate back into the soil or become part of the soil as quickly as a spray, or is it something that's going to take longer? All I hear is that the park district decided it was safe, but we don't know how they decided that. I don't know. I wasn't following the park district's process on how they came to that determination, who they brought in. Did they bring in people who supported biosolids? Did they bring in people who didn't? Did they weigh the differences? I don't know the answers to that. So I don't even know.
The manufacturer of the biosolids.
I'm sorry?
I was at the meeting.
Yeah.
And I, as a concerned citizen, I addressed the park board because I had some concerns about the use of biosolids. And I talked to Ron some time ago about this, and I've still got concerns. They had the folks who produced the biosolids there. They had a guy there from Midwest Pesticide who was there. They had concerned citizens who came up and who had a real problem with using biosolids. And my problem with biosolids was I didn't see a clear standard operating procedure, or I didn't hear a clear park district policy on, how do you predict the weather? How far in advance? How do you stop runoff by use of biosolids? If we use them one day and the park district uses another day, or another time we have runoff. If it rains, it comes a thunderstorm. How do we protect our kids if this stuff becomes mushy over a period of time? How do you hold it? Do you stock it somewhere? Do you have it in a warehouse? How do you handle it? What are the procedures with cleaning the equipment after you've used it with biosolids? I got very short answers that really I felt more like they were just slapping something at me, and I didn't get really good, clear answers on the use of biosolids. So, I'm still against biosolids. But I was there that night, and the Midwest pesticide guy said, I'm not advocating the use of biosolids, but they are a good natural lawn care product. They're cheaper than the other products you could use that for natural lawn care. Biosolids is cheaper. That seemed to be a big reason for using biosolids, but
So I'm not saying that, Rick, I'm not saying that I'm for or against biosolids. I'm saying I don't know enough about biosolids, and it doesn't seem to me, from what I've read and from what I just heard now, that the Park District has done a extensive enough looking into biosolids for me to feel comfortable enough to put our kids on it.
Ron, can you talk a little bit about the EPA and what our knowledge is of it?
The EPA has deemed it safe. Going back to, I think that was September, October, when we started this conversation. The EPA, when we contacted them and looked it up, had deemed it safe. The Park District, I believe, had someone from the EPA at their meeting, or Terry had a meeting with EPA, and I can get more of the information straight from the Park District on that, straight from Terry, on what his presentation was for the biosolids. Again, I'm not pushing one way or the other. I feel the same as many of you do, that I see both sides of using biosolids, the pluses and the minuses of it. My whole intention tonight was to get the input from the board of what direction we want to go as a school district with our.
Sorry, Ron, I'm going to interrupt you. So really, it's administration's job to bring the recommendations, and then the board considers them and decides. So I am bringing the recommendation that we go back to biosolids.
Okay.
The board can obviously talk through it and decide if they want to go ahead and do that or not. Can you also sort of explain, if we don't do that, what are our other options?
Well, we can go without any fertilizer right now, stick with aerating, top dressing, and seeding to try to build turf that way. We can go back to the all organic fertilizer with True Green, which was approximately $28,000 a year to do that on all of our fields, or the biosolids. And the biosolids, they spread all the biosolid. They don't just drop off and deliver. We spread very little of it around some of the smaller areas that they come out with a dump truck and a big piece of equipment, a big tractor for spreading. So they just leave a small pile for us to spread around the areas that their tractor can't get into. Other than that, they do the spreading of all the fields. So
I was also at that meeting with Larry, and I do think the Park District has built a pretty impressive natural lawn care program. And I don't feel strongly about biosolids. What I feel strongly about is natural lawn care. So as long as we stick to that, I don't particularly care if it's biosolids, but anything else is going to be more expensive. And if I had to pick between true green chemicals and biosolids, or pick biosolids.
I think any alternative is going to have its pros and cons, just like biosolids. And so I think if we are in the paradigm of natural lawn care, we should stick in that. Similar to Rebecca, I think we bought equipment, we did things to stay in that realm. So whatever that means for, if biosolids is the recommendation, and we roll with that.
I want to make it clear that 3 years ago or so, I talked natural lawn care. I still believe in natural lawn care. I'm not saying let's don't do natural lawn care. I'm the guy who hung my neck out there, and I certainly believe we ought to do natural lawn care. But if there's an alternative to biosolids, it's going to be more expensive to use. Ron, how long do we have to use biosolids? I understand it's for a period of time. It's not something we're going to do year after year after year. I can't remember what the park district said, but it was maybe 3 years.
I'm not aware of a time commitment on that. We tried to get our name on a list in the past. Is my understanding that MWRD pretty much decides how much they have and who they're going to give it to. If you're not on the list early enough, you won't get into that program. You know, and again, a lot of that is because the manpower, you know, the savings in manpower alone is worth it to a lot of districts, and, you know, park districts, school districts, you know, not to mention the product too. Like I said, just for our district, it was $28,000 for organic fertilizer. And that wasn't doing all of our property. That, you know, that was doing portions of it. If you know, going back a few years ago when we did the natural lawn care presentation, it was, and I'd have to pull up my notes, but I want to say it wasn't even 2/3 of our property that we were treating with organic fertilizer, because it would have been like $50,000 a year or more. And that wasn't multiple applications yet either. So, you know, the big thing with the biosolids, and why I'd like to go that way, if, you know, if that's the direction that everybody wants, is manpower wise and the cost, you know, product wise, the savings for the final result. You know, the final result, I've seen the differences of the biosolid lawns with other fertilizers or a lack of fertilizers, and, you know, the plushness doesn't compare. The biosolid lawns just, they grow and fill in and thicken up really nice.
It's poop.
Well, I don't have a comeback for that part, but
Anything that grows your grass pretty good is gross.
right. You know, you look at compost and all these other products. I mean, you know, manure.
Oh, no, I was saying
all the good fertilizers are pretty much.
That's how I was saying it. It's gonna do a good job because it's poop.
Right.
And just for Larry's sake, I was around while Larry fought real hard for natural lawn care. So I want to back you up on that, Larry. You are definitely, you know, the champion from the boards that I sat on for natural lawn care. So the fact that you are questioning biosolids, I don't want anyone to confuse that with questioning natural lawn care.
Thank you.
So Rick, this hasn't come up in the, I know I'm not going to have the right term for it, the intergovernmental with the city, the park district, and the school district, the committee that you're on?
Well, we haven't had another intergovernmental meeting since the informal first one, so I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Why not, Rick?
You want to go into that now? I don't think it's an agenda item, but we can go into it at another time.
No, I do not want to go into that now. I wanted to ask because I think it's appropriate for that, but nope, conversation over. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, I guess my 2 cents. I'm going to put something on the screen real quick because I don't think the Park District did a very thorough job in their due diligence on this. I was involved in some conversations behind the scenes. Just as one example, if everybody can see that screen right now. That's from Bloomberg. That's not from one of my hard right-wing, sources or something. This is from Bloomberg. And that was one of many things that was on the table that didn't really get discussed at that last Park District meeting. I think the jury's still out on whether or not that stuff is totally safe. There's a lot of questions as to handling of it and when to put it down and when not to put it down. And I don't know. I think the Park District made a very uninformed decision at their last meeting. And I'm not necessarily willing to sign on to that myself, but I'm all for, coming up with an alternative that's not chemicals. I just don't think I don't think this is frankly any better than some of the chemicals that are out there. And I don't put chemicals on my own lawn. I put natural stuff on my own lawn.
Okay.
Fred, what are your thoughts?
I have concerns with the biosolids. I have concerns about what remains in them after, before they're spread. Medicines people take, chemotherapy, drugs, that sort of thing. I'm not convinced that the Park District did the thorough analysis that we would all be satisfied with to make a really informed decision about this. It makes me uncomfortable. I'm for green lawns. I backed Larry up when he fought for it. Part of me would almost rather just do what Ron said and just aerate and overseed and if we get dandelions, we get dandelions. But I'm not entirely comfortable with biosolids, to be honest.
So would the board like to direct us to do our own investigation or to look up a multitude of options and bring them?
If I were to respond to that, Dr. Olson, I would feel comfortable if we as our district did our own little research on biosolids. And if the administration still feels that they want to make the recommendation after they've done their own research, I would feel a lot more comfortable going on the recommendation of you as opposed to the recommendation of the Park District at this point, because we have obviously different, they have the same desires that we do to make sure it's safe, but it's our job to protect our kids, not theirs. I just don't see anything anywhere. I'm not saying that the Park District didn't do a good enough job proving that biosolids is a decent product. I just don't see it anywhere. From what I did look up, I just don't see enough. I don't see enough work done on their part to convince me that biosolids is any safer or any more dangerous than using chemicals.
Okay.
I mean, the EPA has approved ChemLawns products too, right, Ron?
Yeah, I mean,
okay. So
the True Green, the ChemLawns.
So the EPA argument that EPA calls it safe, do we all feel that the chemicals that ChemLawn is using are 100% safe? We have a question there, right? That's where my question is. That's
Roundup is safe
with the biosolids.
Yeah, the EPA said Roundup's okay.
Is it?
So is there going to be a particular organization that you guys want to hear from in particular?
Well, Eric, again, because I was involved a little bit on the back channel stuff going on over at the Park District, I think that's the problem. I don't think there's any one good place to look at that gives you a warm fuzzy about it one way or the other. That's unfortunately what the reality is. And for better or worse, the Park District trotted out primarily the folks who sell this stuff, who are, you know, hopelessly conflicted in that argument. Those aren't the right people to bring out. But I mean, for every good you know, article, you can find a bad one too. And that's I think what they struggled with, and I think we're going to struggle with the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And I guess going off that, where is that going to get us? So I mean, we're going to spend the administration time looking this up. We're going to have the pros and cons. And does it get us any further to having a better answer?
Someone on this panel said it earlier, so I don't want to take credit for it. I just can't remember who it was. Ours, Eric, ours might be a little different because we can, although we may not be able to determine that it is the safest thing out there, application of it, when we do it, how much time it sits on our lawns before our kids have access to it might change my mind or somebody else's mind, because the park district has a different problem where they've got people trampling on their lawns 24/7 all year long. We know that during spring break, we don't have our kids on our specific areas, or I'm not quite sure exactly how it works, but if the administration can come up with a plan and say, hey, if we do it this way, we could minimize the contact with it by our students, which would drastically minimize the effects of it if it were to be non-beneficial to them. It changes the game for us, as opposed to listening to the park district who has other things that they have to contend with and deal with. So that's why I think we could still potentially make this work within our own program.
And Ron, am I understanding correctly that if the park district's moving ahead, then they're going to be putting it on some of our property? Is that correct?
That's what they've done in the past. Now, if we decided that we're not going to allow that to happen, then we're going to need to talk with the park district of what, you know, what their plan going forward is going to be. You know,
Eric, if I'm not mistaken, the wording of our motion from the fall was on any of our properties.
Right. That was my next thing. Yes.
Yeah,
So
I think the board's order doesn't matter if it's us or the park district putting it down. It's not on any of our property. It cannot be used.
Right.
So maybe our conversation needs to take place with the park district prior to making a decision for our board to make that decision. If we're not going to allow it on any of our property, we need the park district to rethink what their plan of attack is going to be for use of our property.
Well, and I think what we're saying,
I'd like to consider is if we are going as a offshoot, if we are going to allow or potentially consider allowing the park district to use it on some of our properties, we would need to know a schedule, and we need to approve that schedule and not leave it up to them as to when they're going to do it and then just inform us, because we may not like their schedule. Their schedule may be right in the middle of fields days at, or at a time where we utilize the fields excessively. So if we are going to consider using it and consider allowing them to use it on our fields, we need to have some parameters built in there that, we have a little more control over when it happens.
Well, I've done that with them in the past, that some of our fields missed being treated because I told them that they couldn't do it that particular week or that day that they were planning on treating. So, for example, the ball fields at Lincoln last year, they never got treated because I had told them that the day that they wanted to do it, that following week, we had way too many activities planned on that field.
Well, that's a problem too, though, because then we're not getting the benefit of what we've negotiated with them. Right. So if we tell them you can't do it on this day, that doesn't mean they can just ignore doing it. That's why I think there's a lot of logistics here that maybe we can make biosolids work, but there's still a little work to be done.
Well, can I suggest, obviously this summer is going to be kind of a non-issue because we already know we don't have any kids that are going to be going to gym class or recess the rest of this, this school year. Right. Plus, as best I've heard, there's not going to be any baseball, this summer that Park Ridge baseball, softball is very unlikely to be playing. So at that point, there's going to be far less of a pressure on the park district to have those ball fields in playing condition at this point. Because they just, normally there's a lot of pressure on them to have them in tip-top shape.
Hey, Rick, on the other hand, this summer would be the good time to double up on biosolids.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I'm just saying, we don't have to worry about necessarily people traipsing on it as much this summer because of what's going on. So it will, the pressure's off, I guess, a little bit, Ron, for us to be able to go back to the park district and talk with them. I've got to believe they're rethinking their fertilization schedule themselves right now in light of all this.
Right.
If nothing else, they don't have to spend the money.
Sure.
They normally do. I was wondering why they were dragging ball fields and putting new sand down in the ball fields the other day. There's not going to be baseball. Why would you spend that money?
Right. Well, I could see maintaining the turf.
Yeah, right.
But the rest of it.
Yeah, doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. To be digging it up and putting the clay and stuff back down and, yeah.
Right. All right. So, well, we haven't read a motion.
Wait,
there
so
was
Rick,
going to be
what we're discussing right now sounds like a continuation of the motion that carried in October. So just going back to those minutes, it says, so this is the motion that everyone, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, everyone unanimously voted yes to. So it says it was moved by the board president and seconded by Pearl that the board consents that it will not use or plan for future use of the EQ biosolids until a further inquiry into its safety has been concluded by District 64. So it sounds like the inquiry just hasn't been concluded, so we just need a little more info. It sounds like 3 or 4 of you wanted before we vote.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
Let me put together get together some more information for biosolids and other what an alternate application or product could be and the cost of that. And
I've seen a list from Midwest Pesticide with alternatives to biosolids. And we've had Midwest Pesticide out here before. I walked the grounds with them at Lincoln.
Right.
Maybe you could reach out to them again if they have something.
Well, and that's what we were using with True Green was an organic alternative that Midwest Pesticides suggested, and that's the one that was $28,000 that we were using for a while.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of True Green, so I don't want to go back there again.
Right.
So I guess, Ron, I'd also like to see, not just, I mean, to me, the park district already did the dog and pony show of rah, rah, it's great, and didn't present the downsides to it. I'd like for the board to be able to consider both. So
Okay.
I'd like you to also find, the articles that are saying it may not be safe, or if
Right, well, that's why I
it's
said-
safe, but, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that's why I was saying, look at the pros and cons of using the biosolids and what alternatives there are to it with some cost for
Yep.
that.
That'd be great.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay,
And,
so
and I
maybe,
think the other part I'm hearing is kind of the application, which I think you're doing due diligence, but I think the board is maybe want to hear a little more on that.
Okay.
so I'm just thinking through, are we okay to push that? No, we're not going to put that on the special meeting next week. We will push it to the next board meeting in May.
Okay.
Is that okay? Or do we need to do it sooner?
No, this could work, I think.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, moving on to the personnel report, which is A7 in our packet. And the personnel report itself is very short, but why don't we take a motion, and then if anybody has any questions for Joel, then we can do it at that time.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the personnel report dated April 20th, 2020, noting that the personnel report is based on the recommendation of the superintendent and not upon the board's direct knowledge regarding any of the specific individuals selected for employment.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Fred, was that you?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So Fred's got the second and he said motion. Any discussion on this? Do you realize this is the first vote really taken all night long in a 5-hour meeting almost? Wow. Any discussion on that? Okay, Natasha, anything? Wow, you know what? I just realized that we blew through 1, 2, 3 without me asking for anything from the public. Was there anything?
No worries. I would have interrupted you. No comments.
Out of sight, out of mind, I guess. Okay, if there's no questions, then why don't we move to a vote?
Any discussion? I don't know. Did you ask about discussion?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
No, you did. Sorry. Okay.
I didn't hear any questions.
Okay. So I'm doing the roll. I'm just going to note that Sotos is here now.
Yep.
Missed the roll, but he's back. Okay. So Sotos,
Yes.
Dallas, yes. Riles,
Yes.
Biaggi,
Yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Little.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you. Right, we've got the consent agenda next. So anything on there specifically, Eric, that you want to talk about with the board? I know we've got the regular meeting dates in there.
No, I'm good.
Okay. So again, why don't we do a motion, and if that's seconded, then we can have a discussion if there's any about anything on the consent agenda.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the consent agenda for April 20th, 2020, which includes bills, payroll, and benefits, approval of financial update for the period ending March 31st, 2020, approval of intergovernmental agreement for shared vision / O&M services, approval of Board of Education regular meeting dates for 2020-21, and the destruction of audio closed recordings. None.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Rebecca, I think you got that one.
Gotcha, Larry.
Larry to the punch. Okay, moved and seconded. Any questions about anything on the consent agenda? Nope. Natasha, nothing new came in the last 30 seconds?
Nothing new.
Okay. All right. I think
Okay.
we're ready for vote.
Little,
Yes.
Sotos,
Yes.
Biaggi,
Yes.
Riles,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Dallas, yes. Motion carries.
Great. Approval of minutes. So this is just the minutes from the regular meeting on March 30th. I think everybody was here for that. Nobody was absent, so we can all vote on that.
Yep.
So we'll take a motion on that as well.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the minutes from the regular meeting on March 30th, 2020.
Second.
Rebecca, that you? Okay, Rebecca had the second. Any discussion on this? Any changes to the minutes as proposed? Any edits that we've got? Tom, are you in Greece all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Nice. Wow, you move quickly, man. Okay, and Natasha, again, nothing new?
No comments.
I'm gonna be religious about this now. Okay.
Okay, Sotos,
Yes.
Biaggi,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Riles,
Yes.
Little,
Yes.
Dallas, yes. Motion carries.
Right. Okay, we've got a couple of other things to discuss that Dr. Olson's going to talk about. I just want to clarify, just ask and make sure for the next meeting that I know what's on the agenda. So obviously, the special ed, the expansion of services is going to be on there again as it was tonight. And we will actually be taking a vote. It sounds like we are going to then have the transportation contracts again, and there may be a discussion that takes place again with that based on what's negotiated from there. So that's going to be the meat of that meeting.
Yes. And then the only other thing will be a personnel report.
Right. And do you anticipate that being
The new field principal as well.
Oh, okay. So will we?
If I can interject, you're going to have the appointment of the principal and a personnel report as well. I just checked with Joel today.
So just so the public knows what we're talking, all 5 of you who are left, that we are going to be voting on the appointment of a new principal for field at that meeting. Normally, we have the person at the meeting in person that we're voting on. Do you have plans for that?
Yes, so we're planning to have that person join us virtually for a little bit.
Okay. Great. So we won't be able to, as we normally get to do, meet that person, those of you who haven't yet in person, but we'll have to wait on that. So anyway, that was all I had on that. So Eric, any?
Yes. So just wanted to give the board a strategic plan update. So when we had put out our survey to the community and we were gathering information, about half of the survey was during non-coronavirus time and half was during. So pretty much we saw that as soon as everything started happening with the coronavirus, all the participation in the survey went extremely down really fast. So in the time that we had the survey open where people were still participating, we received about half the amount of people that you did the last time that you did a survey with parents back in 2015. So in talking with Thought Exchange, the company that runs it, we do have a big enough sample size so that we can take the data, but our feeling was that we really still wanted to allow the community to have that much more input. So one of the things that we're thinking about right now is we can reopen the survey whenever we want. So would it make sense to do that in the spring, now that maybe people, have the more time to be able to do that? Or is it better to do it in the fall when we're actually back in school and back in session and people feel like they're more in a routine? Would we get a better response at that point? So we're kind of deciding between those two pieces. The other piece, and I'm interested in the board's input on that. And then the other piece is that we had originally, we're going to start right away in September and potentially have a new strategic plan by winter break. Obviously, as we've pointed out several times in this meeting, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like in the fall. So it also might be worth it waiting a little. And then we also might have some more information about where are we going with this in the future? I mean, do we need to write this into the strategic plan about remote learning and some of those kinds of things? So I think it might be good for us to not necessarily get started right away at the beginning of the school year to kind of see where we're at. But I was interested in the board's feedback. If you have any insight into, do you think it would be better to do something, this school year or next school year in terms of continuing it? And then I'm also keeping in mind that the board might be doing a survey in regard to my evaluation too. And then is it too many in the spring? So is that another reason to wait till the fall? But I'm certainly open to your ideas around that.
Any thoughts by anybody on board?
I agree on waiting till the fall. Although I do think strategic planning is important. We want to set our goals. I think there's so many unknowns right now and we're not living in normalcy. And, who knows what the new normal is going to look like, but at least in the fall, we might be closer to that. So I think holding off on that is a good idea.
I completely agree with Denise on that. I think people just are upside down right now. They don't know, they don't know what's coming. That's the biggest problem with all of this pandemic is no one knows what the next day holds. And hopefully by August, September, we have a little bit more of an idea of what tomorrow holds.
Yeah. And the other piece I'll say is that, the good part is that we still have a very robust strategic plan. So there are still pieces that are still being finished on that plan anyway. So, waiting a few months, I still think we're going to be okay anyway.
And I don't think anyone wants one more district or one more email from the district right now.
Right.
Just, no one's got the bandwidth for it.
Yeah.
I'm fine with waiting too, but it's also good to let people know that this is, you know, in the works and on the horizon, so that people are still thinking about it.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing that Eric said during that was his evaluation, and I wanted to talk about that tonight. Not the evaluation specifically, but just our process and timeline. And I think the pandemic may have kind of altered us to change course. I hear what Rebecca said, and that maybe sending out another email and another survey may not be a great idea, but I do think we owe Eric some feedback from the board. So I think putting that on an agenda coming up is a good idea.
I agree, Denise. I was going to bring that up in new business and just suggest, if the board's okay with that, of having a closed session, either frankly at the next meeting, where we do just a quick one just to kind of regroup, or at minimum, at the May meeting, so that we can talk about that, so that we're not off track with Eric's review, because I know this is all thrown us for a loop. So, Eric, what's your thought on that? Are you all right? What do you think about us adding just a quick, maybe half-hour close to the beginning of next week, just so that we can talk real briefly, not spend a great deal of time, but just kind of talk with you about the process and regroup.
Yeah, that does make sense. And also, so that the board can think about it, I have certain documents that I owe to you at the end of the year that you'll want to have those pieces too. But obviously, to just talk about it, it certainly makes sense. We could do that next week.
Okay. So if everybody's okay with that, why don't we plan to add just, maybe a half hour on the front end of the meeting for a closed session? We'll just meet a half hour earlier than we had planned.
Yeah.
And that's a single issue in there of his review. And it's primarily, we're not going to go into substance. It's more, as Denise said, I think, process at this point, and just regrouping based on our last conversation.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Joel, would you be kind enough to be able to be available for that for us, just for that part of the meeting? Great, thank you.
And then obviously we have the May agenda. We will have our special meeting next week, which we will advertise in regard to the special ed item. And then we will have our regular meeting on May 18th.
Okay. All right. Any new business from anyone?
Yeah, I guess this might be new business. I'm not real sure. Any thought to the process of how we intend to return the money to the parents of District 64 that have paid into the lunch program?
Yes, so in the communication went out today, there was a link that allows them to have all the options they have for refunds and how to go about them.
All right, how about the collection of Chromebooks?
So that we have not sent out yet, and that's something that we're still talking through.
Yeah, because I'm just curious of how they would clean those.
Right. Well, not only cleaning them physically, but cleaning them technologically too.
Yes.
So yes, we are, ideally, we would collect them all before the end of the year. But the logistics of that are something we're continuing to talk through.
Okay.
Good question, Larry. Okay, any other new business?
April 23rd, which is this week, what is it, Thursday, is the board policy committee meeting at 11 o'clock with a Google Hangout. So that should, so the agenda should be up, I'm guessing, by tomorrow.
Yep.
So just email us or call us if you have any.
It will be up tomorrow morning,
Okay.
48 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, so if anyone has any, issues or anything that they want us to discuss, then let us know or just join the Hangout.
And to piggyback on that, Eric, is PT3 still meeting through all this now? Do they have dates set to meet through, virtually or whatever?
So they have not currently been meeting virtually. And I think that we currently have them scheduled under our PT3 agenda for them to attend the May meeting, our representatives. So that'll be something for Leanne and I to talk about.
Okay. Is there any concern that they're not meeting during this where we're talking about what we're talking about at our board meetings, especially with last week?
There isn't a concern. Yeah, there isn't a concern because at our last meeting with them, they did hear the entire presentation and we took all of their feedback. If we would have met in the meantime, it wouldn't have been about this topic. It would have been about other special ed topics.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Anything else from anyone? Okay, so we will meet in a week, half hour earlier than what's currently on the agenda. That'll be 6:30 instead of 7. 7 o'clock will be the open meeting. 6:30 will be the closed. And if nothing else, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think Tom had that one. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we'll see everybody next week. Thank you.
Good night,
All right,
everybody.
get some rest.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Take
guys.
care.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.